Chapter 56. At this time, Lin Yu had just entered the Haicheng survivor base. His expression was a little sluggish, and his eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. He came in. He actually came in. The base's virus detection equipment did not detect any abnormalities on his body. Before coming in, he was still worried about his body. Could it be that the virus was hidden and he looked normal? But as soon as the machine was used to check, it would immediately change? But when Lin Yu saw the zombies that were still rushing towards him, he dispelled his thoughts. If the virus was really hidden in his body, then why would the other zombies rush towards him? So Lin Yu finally decided to try to see if he could enter the base. If not, then he could only wait outside the base. But fortunately, he came in. Safe passage. Therefore, he immediately went to the registration place of the base and asked his captain if they had really entered the base. Then he went to look for them. Their captain was a level 5 ice ability user, so the temporary accommodation that Haicheng base arranged for them was not too bad. In a relatively old residential area, the buildings in this area were not tall. There were only 6 or 7 floors, and the people who lived there were ability users and their families. But in the base, they could live in such a place. It was already very good, just like ordinary people living in high-end apartments before the end of the world. As for Lin Yu's captain, Li Zhang, he and his team were arranged to stay in this empty room for the time being. Along the way, he asked others to find the location of the residential area. After Lin Yu found the building that Li Zhang and his team were in, he entered the stairs and ran up. Until he reached the 6th floor, he walked to the door of a room. Looking at the room number, he raised his head and knocked on the door. "Who is it?" Someone quickly opened the door. An ordinary-looking young boy, about 20 years old, opened the door and looked outside. When he saw it was Lin Yu, his eyes suddenly widened, and his face was stunned. "Brother Lin Yu, you're not dead?" 3 seconds later, an exclamation sounded. The few people in the room were originally doing their own things. They were just secretly curious about who came to the door. But when they heard this exclamation, everyone seemed to have pressed the pause button at the same time. They all froze. Then, in the next second, a few figures rushed to the door. Lin Yu stood outside the door and looked at the door that had suddenly been pushed open. Li Zhang and a few other brothers had gathered at the door. She stared at him in disbelief. "Lin Yu, you're not?" Li Zhang asked. His eyes were filled with disbelief, surprise, doubt, and confusion. His emotions were so complicated that he couldn't even speak properly. Feng Mingyu, who had just opened the door, also stared at Lin Yu with his small eyes. "Brother Lin Yu, aren't you poisoned? Why are you?" The others also had a bunch of big question marks in their eyes. Lin Yu smiled and looked to his left and right. A trace of vigilance flashed in his eyes. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, he said, "Let me in first." As soon as he said this, the others immediately came back to their senses. Their bodies moved aside in tacit understanding, making way for Lin Yu to enter the house. After Lin Yu entered the house, Feng Mingyu closed the door. If anyone else had heard what Feng Mingyu had said just now, they would have been shocked. It could have brought great trouble to them and Lin Yu. After entering the house, it was just a single room. In the tens of square meters of room, 2 bunk beds were placed against the 2 sides of the wall. It was just enough for the 4 men in the house besides Lin Yu to sleep. Behind the house was a kitchen and a bathroom. The kitchen and the balcony were together. This was a very simple and very common workers' rental house before the end of the world. The kind that paid a few hundred a month for rent. The environment wasn't considered good, but fortunately, the men liked to tidy up. Other than the bunk beds, there was a square table and a few rubber stools. After Lin Yu entered, he casually took a seat against the wall and sat down. Then he waited for the others to sit down. Li Zhang, Feng Mingyu, Fei Chonglin, and Lei Yao all stared at him while looking for a place to sit. The 4 of them couldn't wait to tear Lin Yu apart from his head to his feet. After understanding everything, they would put him back together. Lin Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry at their gazes. He knew that they were very, very curious about what had happened to him. However, even he himself wanted to know what had happened. He only remembered that before he fainted, he locked himself in an empty warehouse. When he woke up, he inexplicably found that he didn't turn into a zombie. But before he fainted, he clearly felt the strange changes in his body. At that time, His body couldn't move, and his limbs slowly stiffened. Moreover, he had a splitting headache, and finally the pain made him faint. In the end, when he woke up, he found that he was fine. He could move and jump like a normal person. Even his blood was bright red. But then he discovered something. There seemed to be a bite mark on his head. It was like two sharp canine teeth, piercing into his flesh. Lin Yu always thought that it was a bite from an animal, because it didn't look like a zombie's bite mark. Lin Yu sorted out his thoughts. Under the 4 pairs of curious and surprised eyes, he opened his mouth and said, "Actually, I also know what happened. I locked myself in a warehouse and wanted to kill myself to end my life. But my head was too painful, so painful that I couldn't even pick up a gun. So I fainted just like that. But I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up. When I woke up, I found that I was still in that warehouse." When the others heard what he said, they all looked at him in disbelief. Li Zheng slightly frowned and asked, "Then did you find anything strange around you? Or is there any part of your body that has mutated?" Lin Yu nodded and said, "Yes." Li Zheng immediately asked, "What is it?" Lin Yu replied, "I've seen the warehouse door that I closed. It was pried open by someone. I think that during the time I was unconscious, something seemed to have come in." He trusted his brothers very much. After all, they had been working together since the end of the world. They helped each other to survive in this dangerous post-apocalyptic world. Even when he was injured by the zombies this time, they didn't have the thought of giving up on him. He was the one who wanted to stay and cover for them. So whatever Lin Yu had, he wouldn't hide too much from these people. Hearing that something entered the warehouse where Lin Yu was alone, the others' eyes flashed with worry. "What is it?" Li Zheng asked. Lin Yu shook his head and said, "I also don't know. When I woke up, there was nothing in the warehouse. The door was open, but the zombies didn't come in at that time." Chapter 57. Listening to Lin Yu's explanation, the others looked at each other. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he suddenly stretched out his hand and rolled up his sleeves. He raised his left wrist and used his other hand to pull out a dagger from his thigh. "Brother Lin Yu, what are you doing?" Feng Mingyu was shocked to see him suddenly pull out a dagger. She quickly asked. Lin Yu said, "Look." As he said that, he used the sharp blade of the dagger to cut the skin of his left hand. A line of blood immediately appeared on Lin Yu's left hand. Bright red blood immediately gushed out of the wound and dripped onto the ground. "The blood is red. That means there's nothing wrong with your body for the time being." Li Zheng looked at Lin Yu's blood and judged. Lin Yu didn't say anything. He just looked at them silently. He didn't move. "Wound." One of the 2 men, who had been silent all this while, suddenly uttered 2 words at this moment. Lin Yu glanced at him and smiled. Sure enough, the simple-minded Lei Yao seemed to be a simple-minded person. His observation skills were the sharpest. He had always been the team's scout. With Lei Yao's reminder, the others immediately focused their attention on Lin Yu's wound and discovered that the wound was slowly healing itself, although it was very slow, but it was really healing on its own. Seeing this, everyone's eyes widened. They all knew that Lin Yu was an ordinary person without any ability. He didn't have any healing ability, so it was impossible for him to heal on his own. Lei Yao's eyes narrowed slightly on his stiff face. He asked, "Is it a healing ability?" Although Lei Yao's words were short, everyone understood what he meant. A few eyes immediately stared at Lin Yu's face, wanting to know his answer. Lin Yu shook his head and said, "This isn't an ability. My physique has mutated." This wasn't his ability, but his physique had changed. Moreover, this healing ability was only effective on himself. His words caused a trace of disappointment to flash across the others' eyes, but most of them felt relieved. Then, they were all happy for Lin Yu. "That's great. That way, we won't have to worry about you accidentally dying," Li Zheng said with a sigh of relief. Because among the 5 of them, Lin Yu was the weakest. Because he was not a mutant. Therefore, every time there was a mission, everyone would first worry about his safety. At this moment, Lin Yu revealed a mysterious smile. "That's not all. Look." As he spoke, he put the dagger in his right hand back into the sheath on his thigh. Then, he raised his right palm slightly. His expression became even more serious as he stared at his palm. Just when the others were confused about what he was going to do, they saw a wisp of black flame suddenly jump out from his palm. Although it didn't jump very high, it was only a very small wisp, only about an inch high. The little black flame stood quietly in his palm. It was calm and did not sway at all. But almost at the same time, the others jumped back in an instant. Like a few frightened cats, they ran away in a panic with their fur standing on end. In the blink of an eye, the other four had already retreated far away from Lin Yu's position. They all stood in the corner furthest away from Lin Yu and looked at him in horror. Hellfire! Lei Yao was the first to react and hid in the bathroom. Only a head popped out from behind the door and cried out in alarm at Lin Yu's palm. His face no longer had its usual dull expression. At this moment, it was filled with horror and astonishment. Fei Chonglin, who was a step behind him, stuck his head out from under Lei Yao. Only half of his face was exposed, which were the two eyes above his nose. Li Zheng and Feng Mingyu, on the other hand, had already scurried to the two opposite corners of Lin Yu's house. Lin Yu looked at them amusedly and said, "You don't have to be so nervous. The power of my fire isn't even 1% of our leaders. Moreover, my fire is only effective when it touches my body." As he spoke, he extinguished the fire again. Then, he released it and extinguished it again. Released it again. Extinguished it again. He was having a lot of fun. The other four were speechless. It wasn't that they were too crazy, but this one looked exactly the same as the leader of the Netherworld King's base, the leader of the Netherworld Flame. Their base was very famous, and it was because of the strange fire ability of their leader. Really? Hey, stop playing with it. Can't you put it away first? Fei Chonglin asked him in disbelief. Lin Yu kept playing with it excitedly. As soon as they saw that fire, their hearts were filled with fear. Hurry up and put it away. Don't be so scary. Lin Yu could only clench his fist and put it down. He said, "This is my special ability. You guys didn't guess wrong. This has the same effect as our leaders. However, my fire needs to touch an object. It will be effective. It won't be effective in the air, because it won't emit the poisonous gas." Seeing him put away the flame, the others slowly and cautiously walked out. But they didn't dare to get too close to Lin Yu. They all stood at a distance of 1.5 meters. Feng Mingyu asked curiously, "Brother Lin Yu, is this the ability that was awakened after you fainted? I didn't expect you to not become a zombie after being scratched by a zombie. Instead, it will be awakened. It's really magical." After he finished speaking, he subconsciously turned his head to look at Li Zheng and the others. They all looked at Lin Yu and nodded at the same time. They had never heard of a normal person who would be fine after being scratched or bitten by a zombie and still be able to awaken their ability, because everyone would be infected by the virus and then slowly become zombies. The zombie virus after the end of the world was very scary. As long as it was infected, it was almost a dead end. They had never heard of the virus being able to awaken a person's ability from the major bases, because the ability users in the current end of the world didn't awaken when the end of the world came. Instead, it was awakened by various other factors. But it was definitely not awakened by the zombie virus. It was already amazing that Lin Yu didn't become a zombie. They didn't expect him to be able to awaken his ability. It was simply too incredible. Li Zheng stared at Lin Yu and sized him up. He said with a puzzled face, "How could this be? What exactly happened to your body?" Lin Yu shook his head and said, "I don't know. I became like this after I woke up." The others, they didn't know what to say about Lin Yu's luck. He actually encountered such a thing. He was already very lucky that he didn't become a zombie after being scratched by a zombie. He even awakened his body's self-healing ability. He even awakened his ability. Was this rebirth from the dead? Just the self-healing ability of his body was enough to make others jealous and envious. Chapter 58. Feng Mingyu said excitedly, "Brother Lin Yu, your skill is awesome, and your ability is awesome too." Speaking of Lin Yu's ability, everyone was curious. "But I didn't expect you to awaken the poison fire ability. How's the effect now?" Lin Yu was very direct. He stood up and looked around the room. Finally, he saw the trash in the trash can. He walked over and picked up the trash along with the bag. putting it in the open space in the room. Then, he flipped his palm, and the wisp of black flame was thrown to the top of the trash bag. In just an instant, the bag of trash quickly melted and disappeared into thin air without even emitting any smoke. Not even a speck of ash was left on the ground. However, that wisp of flame was still standing straight on the ground. Soon, the floor below it also caved in. Looking at the things touched by the flame, it seemed to be swallowed up. In fact, the melting speed was too fast. But this fire could even melt the cement tiles on the floor, which was a bit scary. Lin Yu hurriedly waved his hand, and the wisp of flame floated back into his palm. The others looked at the flame that flew back to Lin Yu's palm in surprise, and then looked at the place on the ground where the flame stood. There was a small pit there. Feng Mingyu said, "Your fire is almost the same as our leader's mutant fire ability. The effect is almost the same." Lin Yu shook his head and said, "It's still not the same. My fire has no smell, so the people around it won't be poisoned. It's still different from our leaders." Feng Mingyu said, "But the appearance and the melting effect are the same." Lin Yu nodded in agreement. "That's true." Li Zhang calmed down and said in a deep voice, "Don't spread this out. Be careful with what you say in the future. Understand?" The other three nodded in understanding. After all, this was too strange. If the people in the base knew about it, if it was spread to their leader, they might capture Lin Yu for various experiments. Being able to resist the zombie virus was a very big thing. Also, it could stimulate self-healing and awaken abilities. Just these 2 points alone, anyone with a bit of ambition would want to use this method. Lei Yao asked curiously, "Lin Yu, you just said that when you fainted in the warehouse, you didn't see anything. Did something go in, but it didn't do anything to you?" Lin Yu shook his head blankly. "Something did come in, but as for what it did to me, I don't know. I was unconscious at the time." The others looked at each other and felt that it was a pity. If they knew what came in, they might be able to figure out what was going on with Lin Yu's body. But Lin Yu glanced at them with hesitation in his eyes. "What's wrong?" The others looked at him strangely. Lin Yu raised his hand and flipped open the clothes on his chest, revealing his chest muscles. Of course, the few of them had seen everyone's naked bodies and were even familiar with them. At this time, when he looked at Lin Yu's chest, he saw that there were 2 small holes on his usually smooth and firm muscles. "What is this?" Feng Mingyu asked. Everyone's eyes were instantly fixed on the 2 small holes in Lin Yu's chest. "They look like teeth marks?" "They seem to be the teeth of an animal," Lei Yao said with a pensive look in his eyes. "Lin Yu, were you molested by a beast?" Li Zhang stared at him with a strange look in his eyes. Lin Yu rolled his eyes. "Can't you be more serious?" The few of them had a bit of a smile in their eyes. Fei Chong asked Lin Yu, "Then what happened?" Lin Yu also said with a puzzled face, "When I woke up in the warehouse, I only found these teeth marks the next day. I don't even know when I got these teeth marks. If I have to say, it should be left by the thing that came in when I fainted in the warehouse." Lei Yao said with a buzzing voice, "These 2 teeth marks are very deep. Even if you healed yourself, you still couldn't get rid of these 2 scars. Is the change in your body related to these teeth marks?" Lin Yu nodded and said, "That's what I think too. Otherwise, why would I have these teeth marks instead of turning into a zombie? And it doesn't look like it was bitten by a zombie." The few of them looked at it and nodded. Li Zhang said, "It looks like it's true. Otherwise, there's no way to explain your current situation. But no matter what, you came back safely. That's enough. Don't say anything else." As he said that, he went forward and patted Lin Yu's shoulder. Thinking of how they abandoned Lin Yu at that time, Li Zhang felt very guilty. Not only him, but the others also felt the same. As soon as Li Zhang said that, the other 3 became silent. Originally, they had been very upset about this matter for the past few days, but they still had a mission, so they could only suppress the sadness of losing a brother in their hearts. But now, the brother they thought they had lost was back in one piece, and it was even better than before. As soon as Lin Yu saw their darkened expressions, he laughed. "That's right. Look at me. I'm lucky to be back. I don't need you guys to help me go back and take care of Yin Yin in the future." As he said that, he suddenly changed the topic and said, "Oh right, Did you guys see Sea City's Purple Thunder leader? Their mission this time was to find one of the 3 leaders of the Sea City base. I heard that he was a very gentle leader with a good character. As soon as they heard that it was business, the expressions of the others changed. Li Zheng shook his head and said, I didn't see him. He led the team out of the base and hasn't returned yet. We didn't see him. Lin Yu was stunned for a moment and said, he left the base? To search for supplies? Then we really came at the wrong time. So are we going to wait for him to return now? Li Zheng nodded and said, I asked. He's been out for almost a month and should be back soon. So we'll wait for him now. Lei Yao said, we still have some time. As long as leader sends the captain and his family out, we will be able to escape. As long as the leader sends the leader and his family out, she can move. As he said that, the expressions of the 5 people in the room turned gloomy. Their expressions were filled with coldness and hatred. Feng Mingyu said somewhat angrily, Humph, wait for the leader to send her family away. Then we can start to deal with those people. A bunch of ambitious scum. Do they think they can get rid of our leader and take the base for themselves? I think the leader will definitely destroy the base. Li Zheng said in agreement, that's indeed what the leader wants. Otherwise, why would he let the leader and his people leave quietly first? Fei Chonglin continued, and he told us to come to the Sea City base to discuss cooperation with their leader. Chapter 59. Yes, their task this time was to rush to Sea City ahead of time. In fact, they had been on the road for almost a month. If they hadn't encountered a group of ferocious bandits on the way, they would have arrived at Sea City base. If they hadn't robbed their car, they would have arrived at Sea City base. The bandits of the apocalypse were a group of lunatics who would go crazy as long as they had food. They would even eat people when they were hungry. So in order to complete their task, they did not fight with the other party. It was just that their car was robbed by the other party. But these 5 people did not know that their leader had died in battle not long ago. Although she had long been aware that those people would soon make a move, she did not expect that there was a traitor in her hands. Not only did he know her plan, he betrayed her and even helped to poison her. Although the leader of the Netherworld King's base had a powerful Netherworld fire ability, her body was not impervious to poison. The other party also knew her very well, so they started from her weakness. 5 level 7 adepts besieged her, who was also a level 7 adept at the same level. The result was that she died, but she also seriously injured several other experts. In the end, she dragged one of them down with her. Her brothers and sisters, although they had escaped, but at this time they were being chased. But now in the apocalypse where communication was blocked, Lin Yu and the others who did not receive the news did not know about this matter. They only knew that their leader had given them a task. They had to complete it now. While Lin Yu and the others were waiting for the return of the Purple Thunder leader of Sea City base, they also did not know. The person they were waiting for had already gone to chase a zombie that had kidnapped his daughter. It was only his deputy leader and the army that had returned. At a rest stop not far from the base, Xiao Yunlong was sitting on the only leather sofa in the room. There were 2 soldiers standing behind him and several soldiers standing around him. There were also 2 soldiers guarding outside the door. And 3 meters away from Xiao Yunlong, 3 people stood there with their hands tied behind their backs. 2 men and 1 woman. It was Lin Yong, Lu Hongshi, and Liang Kaiyan. Xiao Yunlong's tall body leaned against the back of the sofa, one arm resting on the top of the sofa, at the same level as his shoulder. The other hand was playing with a pistol. You mean, that woman has now become a zombie? He looked at the gun in his hand and said. However, he did not look at the 3 of them. The 3 of them glanced at the soldiers who were pointing their rifles at them and did not dare to move. Lin Yong calmly said, yes, because we originally wanted her to take us to the Purple Thunder Chief's daughter. She's the only one who knows this place. We don't. That's why we're waiting for her to bring us to that place. Then, we'll be able to take back the Purple Thunder leader's daughter. I just didn't expect her to. Xiao Yunlong coldly interrupted him. Return it to the leader? Would you be so kind? Hee. He laughed mockingly and said, of course you have to return it. Otherwise, even if you don't get killed by us, we'll kill you. He would also be killed by Yang Hao. In order to get rid of that senseless woman, he dared to borrow our family's Xiao Yueling. You even made her disappear. You have to explain this to our leader." The foreheads of Lin Yong and the other two were instantly beaded with sweat, bowing their heads and not daring to look at Xiao Yunlong's fierce eyes. Because Xiao Yunlong had seen through the truth of the matter, it was unnecessary for them to say anything now. Xiao Yunlong's face darkened, staring at the three people with burning eyes. "So, what about now? You killed that woman, but you also made our Xiao Yueling disappear. Do you think your 3 lives are enough to compensate for our Xiao Yueling?" Bang, bang, bang. Before he finished his words, the gun in his hand that was spinning randomly was instantly grasped tightly by him. Then 3 gunshots rang out. Without even a greeting, before the 3 people could react, 3 bullets were shot into their foreheads. A thumb-sized bloody hole was left on their foreheads, emitting a wisp of bright red. Puff, puff, puff. The 3 people's eyes widened and fell to the ground with a blank look on their faces. "Throw it out." Xiao Yunlong put away the gun, stood up and threw out a sentence, then lifted his long legs and walked out of the room.
Yes.
The several soldiers standing in the background immediately responded. Then they quickly began to lift the body. Xiao Yunlong went out and said to the adjutant next to him, "Pass the news to the leader. Let him know that the woman is dead. Also, send someone to verify and see if they can see if the woman has turned into a zombie, or if she has become a corpse that has been gnawed." The adjutant immediately nodded. "Yes, I will go now." Looking at the back of his men leaving, Xiao Yunlong wanted to laugh. However, he sighed and hoped that the little girl was fine. At this time, the corpse of Lu Tianyu, who was sent by Xiao Yunlong to verify the death, was looking for mice in the grass in the space. She was hungry, smelling Wu Yueling's scent every day. The more she smelled, the hungrier she was. But she couldn't go out of the space to find food now, because the level 5 zombie was waiting outside. So she thought of the little rabbit in the space. But thinking about it, the rabbit seemed to be Xiao Budian's playmate. Would she be sad if she ate Xiao Budian? So Lin Xiao had to give up the rabbit meat. But she suddenly remembered that when she threw the rabbit in, at that time, she also put a nest of little hairless mice in. She didn't know if those little things were dead or not. So many days had passed. Without the feeding of the female mouse, they must have died. But there was another faint voice in her heart telling her that they were not dead, not dead. So Lin Xiao bent down and looked for those little things in the grass that was higher than an adult's knee. As a result, she really found that those little things were not dead. But she didn't know where they had gone. The nest where they were originally placed was empty. In this space, in addition to her, there were 2 zombies, Wu Yueling and Xiedong, plus a child, and the other creature was the little rabbit. The rabbit didn't eat meat, so it could be the 3 of them. The little girl ate strawberries, so she certainly wouldn't eat raw mice. So if it wasn't her, then it must be Xiedong. But after her observation, Xiedong was only interested in human meat, but he despised other animals. When she gave him the little rabbit, Xiedong didn't even look at it. So excluding all kinds of things, no one in this space would eat this nest of mice. Although she didn't know if there were any other species in her space, Lin Xiao had lived here for so long. But she didn't see anything, unless there was something in the lake. After thinking about it, Lin Xiao still felt that the little mice were still alive. So she went into the grass to look. In the end, after searching for a long time, she still couldn't find it. Even though her eyes, nose, and ears were better than a dog's, she still couldn't find it. Chapter 60. Xiedong stayed in his own small space, trying to control his fire ability. After Wu Yueling took a shower, she didn't follow Lin Xiao anymore. She played with the rabbit on the bed that Lin Xiao prepared for her, and occasionally looked in Lin Xiao's direction. Lin Xiao searched a few times, but couldn't find the nest of mice, so she gave up. She couldn't find them. That was amazing. Did she go to heaven? She went to a flat piece of land by the lake and sat down, closing her eyes to sense the outside. She found that the 3 high-level zombies were still wandering on the road, not willing to leave. It seemed that this time it was determined not to leave. Lin Xiao couldn't help but have a headache. As a zombie, why do you hold a grudge? She had merely snatched one of its prey. It could just look for the next one. Did it have to chase her like this? Although the zombie leader's IQ had increased, his temper had also increased. No, she couldn't let this thing disturb her journey. It was too suffocating to keep hiding when she saw it. She should go out and fight. If she couldn't find it, she could still run. Her running speed was very fast. Although she couldn't jump on all fours like other high-level zombies because it was too ugly, she couldn't do that. But even if she ran on 2 legs, she would still be very fast. Moreover, Lin Xiao hadn't tested the limit of her running speed. As for the 2 level 3 zombies, Xiaodong might not be able to fight them with his bare hands. But to deal with zombies, using a gun was the most convenient. Although a gun was useless against high-level zombies, it was still useful against intelligent level 3 zombies. As long as her reaction was faster than them, she could grab the opportunity to shoot before they did. Then she could easily deal with them. With a plan in mind, she immediately stood up. She walked towards the dark door of the small space. Feeling her coming to the door, Xiaodong immediately stopped playing with the fire in his hand. He turned to look at her. Lin Xiao took a piece of paper and wrote something on it. She handed it to him. "I'm going to fight the level 5 zombie. Come with me." Staying in the space was not the way. Xiaodong nodded in agreement and immediately armed himself. Although his ability wasn't very useful now, he still had a gun. As a special forces soldier, he was fearless. In fact, in his heart, he was also waiting for Lin Xiao to let him go out to have some fun. To get some fresh air. Lin Xiao also wrote in his notebook, "If you can't win, don't force yourself. And don't worry about me. If you get separated from me, go straight south. We'll run into each other." Xiaodong nodded his head in agreement. After all, with their current combat power, they might not even be able to defeat that level 5 zombie. However, they did not want to continue waiting, so they could only fight. Seeing that he was ready, Lin Xiao grabbed him. In a flash, the 2 of them disappeared from the small space. As soon as the 2 of them came out, they immediately struck first to gain the upper hand. Especially Lin Xiao, she had scanned the location of the 2 zombies before coming out. He also told Xiaodong the angle and distance of the location. So when the 2 of them came out, the bullets in their hands immediately shot at the foreheads of 2 level 3 zombies not far away. 222 dash, a figure flashed and appeared, followed by the sound of a machine gun. The reaction of the 3 zombies was that when the 2 of them flashed out, they were stunned for a moment. Even that 1 second of stunned was enough for the 2 experienced Special Forces soldiers to hit the target. The quickest to react was the level 5 zombie leader. It roared fiercely. Then its body immediately rushed toward Lin Xiao. The 2 level 3 zombies' reaction was a bit slower. By the time they reacted, the bullets had already hit their heads. As soon as the 2 of them appeared, they neatly dealt with the 2 zombie subordinates. When the level 5 zombie rushed over, it even looked back at the 2 subordinates that had fallen on the ground. But it just glanced at them casually and did not care too much. Instead, it rushed toward Lin Xiao with a clear target. After shooting at the level 3 zombie, Lin Xiao immediately changed direction and shot at the level 5 zombie. But the speed of the opponent was too fast. The speed of her bullets could not keep up with the speed of the opponent's movement. Lin Xiao also knew this, because she could see the trajectory of the bullets. And in her eyes, the speed was not fast. Seeing that the level 5 zombie didn't care about the bullets and was rushing towards him, Zhang Hong was shocked. Lin Xiao immediately threw the gun and flicked the black hot nails on her hands. Just when the opponent fiercely flew toward her from above, Lin Xiao suddenly squatted her legs. Then, with a backflip, he dodged the claw of the other party. At the same time, when she somersaulted backward, she also waved one of her claws toward the opponent's chest. The 2 zombies separated after one hit. Lin Xiao somersaulted and rolled on the ground. After rolling, her body immediately turned back, vigilantly staring at the zombie leader that had rolled behind her. With this look, she saw that there were 3 or 4 very deep sword wounds on the opponent's chest. Lin Xiao's heart was surprised, staring at the zombie leader's wounds. The zombie leader was also stunned at this time. It curiously looked down at its chest, looking at its originally very hard flesh that even bullets could not penetrate. At this time, it was scratched by its own kind that was weaker than it. Looking at the thick, black blood flowing out from the 4 wounds of different sizes, Xiao Luo's eyes widened. The zombie leader did not feel pain, but it felt angry. It raised its head, staring with its eyebrows raised. Baring its teeth, It made a low and strange roar at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao heard its voice and understood its meaning. She could not help but want to laugh in her heart. She heard the zombie say, "You dare to scratch me? I will bite you to death." It was obviously a zombie leader, but it had such a childish thought. "So you want to bite me to death now? Then what were you doing before?" Lin Xiao did not say anything, but her face was full of smiles. The ridicule in her eyes was the most obvious. And the opposite zombie was very smart. It also understood Lin Xiao's ridiculing eyes. It became even angrier, roaring loudly at Lin Xiao, a woo. Then its body flashed, and it rushed toward Lin Xiao. At the same time, it wiped its chest with one hand, and the several wounds immediately stopped bleeding. There was also a thin layer of ice fog on the wounds. It also knew that it used its own ability to seal the wounds. Then with a strong killing intent, it rushed toward Lin Xiao very quickly. With a strong aura, there was a wave of ice blades. When Lin Xiao saw the ice blades condensed in the air, she secretly knew that it was not good. She secretly made a gesture to Xiaodong, who had been quietly watching on the other side, and then she turned around. She quickly jumped into the forest on the side. Chapter 61. This level 5 zombie was not only physically strong, but it also had a superpower attack. No wonder even a level 5 paranormal wasn't a match for it. It was because it wasn't afraid of fighting. If it wasn't for Lin Xiao's sharp nails, she probably wouldn't have been able to hurt it. Lin Xiao gestured to Xiaodong to retreat, then turned around and jumped away. As soon as she left her original position, a palm-wide ice blade pierced the ground with a burst of cold air. But it didn't melt immediately. If it was a level 5 paranormal's ice blade, it wouldn't be able to pierce the ground and would only shatter into pieces. But this level 5 zombie's ice blade pierced the ground. Although it wasn't very deep, it was enough to see its strength. So Lin Xiao decisively turned around and ran, leading it away. That way, Xiaodong could escape on his own, so that the zombie wouldn't lose its temper and take it out on Xiaodong. The zombie leader threw out an ice blade, but when it saw that it couldn't hit Lin Xiao, it immediately sped up and chased. Under the huge pressure, Lin Xiao didn't seem to panic. Instead, he calmly ran into the forest, but his speed had increased by a few notches. Although she was usually a bit unreliable when it came to real action, her mind was very clear and rational, and she wouldn't panic. This was also Lin Xiao's temperament and instinct from training in the army. The more dangerous it was, the calmer she became. Feeling that the zombie leader was chasing after her like a leopard, Lin Xiao specially ran through the areas with more obstacles. Places with many trees, tall grass, and towering rocks were all Lin Xiao's escape routes. Although Lin Xiao was running towards these difficult places, there were no obstacles under her feet at all. Instead, she was as relaxed as a mouse, running like a ghost. As for the zombie leader that caught up from behind, his line of sight was blocked by the surrounding trees and bushes. It limited its line of sight. Plus, it was angry, so no one focused on Lin Xiao's actions. As soon as the zombie leader entered the woods, it brought a gust of cold wind and ice thorns that ravaged the plants around it. Humans didn't dare to enter the woods, but zombies weren't afraid of the dangers in the woods, because it didn't affect them at all. The zombie leader's speed was very fast, but as soon as it entered the forest, it stopped moving. It was blocked by the surrounding vegetation, rocks, and other obstacles, so its speed immediately decreased by 30%. Sensing that Lin Xiao's aura seemed to be getting further and further away, it immediately became anxious. But it had its own way, and that was to leap upwards. He jumped onto a tall tree and stared in Lin Xiao's direction. Then, like a monkey, he leaped from one tree to the next. Lin Xiao sensed the zombie leader's aura and turned around to look at its movements. She realized that it knew how to climb trees, which put her in a bad situation. But she didn't stop and continued to run forward. But just as she was about to reach a rock, her body suddenly froze. He turned around abruptly and twisted his upper body. His body rolled to the side. A small rain of icicles fell from the sky, fiercely stabbing into the place where Lin Xiao had rolled away. The ice spikes were as thick as fingers, all pierced into the rocks and the ground. The ones that pierced into the rocks broke into pieces, and the ones that fell on the ground directly pierced into the ground. Lin Xiao quickly glanced at the ice spikes and continued to run away. If these ice spikes pierced into her body, although it wouldn't hurt, it would still pierce very deeply. She didn't want her body, which was already rotten to the core, to have another pile of small holes. How ugly would that be? And it wouldn't heal. It was already ugly enough, even if it got uglier. It didn't seem like it would affect her. Anyway, with her current zombie appearance, it was impossible for her to find a husband to marry, right? Who would dare to marry her? Could it be that she had to find a zombie to be her husband? Forget it. Her taste wasn't that heavy. Lin Xiao could still think of the boring problem of marriage at this time. If the zombie behind her knew what she was thinking, it would definitely be furious. It would definitely be stomping its feet in anger. Just as she rolled to the side and stood up, she felt a piercing sound coming from above her head. Lin Xiao didn't even look and directly bent down to squat back to the ground. Just as she bent down, a figure pounced over her head. But the angle was off, and the claws didn't grab Lin Xiao's head. Instead, it grabbed empty air. Roar! Seeing that its attack missed again, the zombie leader rolled in the air before landing on the ground. It roared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao stared at its chest and found that there were a few wounds that she had scratched on it. There was a layer of white ice that had frozen them. Fuck. It actually knew how to bandage its own wounds. The zombie leader saw that its roar didn't have any effect on the low-level zombie in front of it. This wasn't the first time, and this made the zombie leader very puzzled. Why could it control other low-level zombies, but this one always ignored it? In the zombie leader's senses, it had always felt that Lin Xiao's aura was only that of a level 3 zombie. She hadn't reached level 4 yet, so it could control other level 3 zombies, but not the one in front of it. This made the zombie leader's heart very annoyed. So it kept chasing Lin Xiao, wanting to use force to subdue Lin Xiao. But it didn't expect Lin Xiao to be so cunning and good at slipping away. In fact, it didn't care that Lin Xiao had snatched the food from its mouth. It kept chasing Lin Xiao, mainly because it felt that it must control this low-level zombie. Otherwise, it would feel that something was wrong. And now that Lin Xiao was being stared at, she was thinking about how to escape from this zombie's hands. She was really a level lower than it, because this thing could climb up trees and jump long distances on the trees. Lin Xiao felt that she couldn't, because her jumping ability wasn't as good as her running speed. So when she saw this thing jumping on the trees, Lin Xiao knew that she couldn't escape. Sure enough, a level 5 zombie leader wasn't easy to deal with. At this moment, the zombie leader on the opposite side suddenly flashed and rushed towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao had been staring at it, and seeing it suddenly rushing towards her, she immediately reacted in time. He immediately reacted and took a step back, crossing his arms in front of him to protect himself. Then, she felt a powerful blow on her arm, bringing with it a sharp aura. The zombie leader slapped her hand with its claw. After its claw hit her hand, Lin Xiao retreated with her leg and twisted her waist. Her upper body dodged to the side and instantly diverted the zombie leader's attack to one side. At the same time, she lifted her leg. She kicked towards the zombie leader's abdomen. The zombie leader didn't care about her kick, so Lin Xiao kicked its abdomen. In the next second, its body was sent flying backward. Chapter 62. Ouch! Then the zombie leader was sent flying backward with a confused look on its face. It originally thought that since Lin Xiao looked thin and could only crawl on the ground to escape, the strength of her legs and feet shouldn't be as strong as its own. So it didn't care about the kick, but what happened was different from what it expected. In the end, it was sent flying. Lin Xiao always knew that she was very strong, but she didn't expect that she could kick the zombie leader so far away. She was also stunned for a moment, but in the next second, she immediately chased after the zombie leader at a faster speed, and at the same time, slashed at its head with both of her hands. Roar! Sensing danger, the zombie leader quickly did a backflip in the air. It managed to dodge Lin Xiao's claws. After landing, it angrily roared at Lin Xiao again, and fiercely kicked its hind legs. It pounced on Lin Xiao, who was in the air just now, and its claws shot at Lin Xiao from all directions with a burst of ice blades. When Lin Xiao saw this, he knew that he was really angry. There were hundreds of ice blades shooting down from above her head. It was impossible for her to dodge in the air, so she could only return to the space. So, in the next second, Lin Xiao, who was still in the air, disappeared into thin air before the large number of ice blades stabbed into her body. Only a burst of ice blades were left behind, which all stabbed into the ground, and the trees and grass in this small area were riddled with holes. Roar! Seeing that Lin Xiao used this trick to disappear, the zombie leader immediately bared its teeth and roared. It turned around and violently scratched the surrounding grass, trees, and rocks, creating another scene of abuse. After Lin Xiao flashed into the space, she appeared on the flat ground by the lake. She stood in the same place and closed her eyes to sense the situation outside. Seeing the zombie leader's irritable look, she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. No matter how irritable it couldn't enter her space. She had the space. Who was she afraid of? But Lin Dao soon became disappointed again. She had entered. But how was she going to get out? Lin Xiao realized that she seemed to have done something stupid, which was to come out of the space. This zombie leader seemed to know where she disappeared to, so it would come out from. Otherwise, why would they be guarding the road for so long? Now that Lin Xiao had appeared from that place, didn't this just confirm his thoughts? Thinking of this, Lin Xiao wanted to beat himself up. What had she done? She had dug herself into a pit. It was all because she was too worried about her family that she neglected the details in front of her. When he came back to his senses, he realized that it was already too late. After watching the zombie leader vent its anger, it jumped up a tall tree and quietly squatted there. It was like a predator patiently waiting for its prey to appear, silently guarding the top. It was obvious that he was waiting for her to leave. It seems that she still underestimated this zombie's IQ. Lin Xiao opened his eyes. If only she could enter that dazed state again and leave this place like a dream. Thinking of the previous two situations, Lin Xiao was very envious. But she couldn't find the trick to activating this skill. What kind of opportunity would there be? Just as she was thinking about how to use this skill, her head suddenly sank. A faint beckoning intent caused her mind to suddenly become muddled again. It was the state that she wanted to enter before. But her figure didn't become transparent to the outside world, but directly became transparent in the space. Wu Yueling, who was watching her from not far away, suddenly saw Lin Xiao standing by the lake in a daze. She felt a little strange. But after a while, she saw Lin Xiao's figure slowly become a transparent shadow. Although it was transparent, it didn't completely disappear. At least Wu Yueling's eyes could still see Lin Xiao's transparent body. She looked at Lin Xiao with wide eyes in surprise, although she was very curious. Because since she met this zombie, a lot of strange things had happened. Anyway, she couldn't look at Lin Xiao with the eyes of a normal zombie. Although Wu Yueling didn't know what it meant, she couldn't look at Lin Xiao with the eyes of a normal zombie. Although Wu Yueling didn't know what it meant, she couldn't look at Lin Xiao with the eyes of a normal zombie. Her simple mind only knew that this zombie was different. It was special. It was also the only zombie that wouldn't show her the horrifying expression of wanting to eat her. Then she looked at Lin Xiao's transparent figure curiously. She slowly walked into the lake and went into the water. She kept going down. The water went over her knees, then her thighs, and then to her waist. But Lin Xiao still didn't want to stop and kept going down. The water continued to go over her chest, neck, mouth, nose, and eyes. Soon, Lin Xiao's figure disappeared from the water. Why did he go down? Wu Yueling was just curious at first. She was curious about what Lin Xiao was doing in the water. Maybe he went down to catch a fish? Would he catch a big fish? Was he going to roast it for her? She quietly looked at the place where Lin Xiao disappeared, and these thoughts flashed through her mind. Then she waited slowly, waiting for Lin Xiao to come out of the water. But she waited for a long time, but Lin Xiao didn't come out. Wu Yueling began to feel uneasy. Time passed slowly. The longer time passed, the more she couldn't sit still. So she couldn't help but get up from the sofa. She carried the rabbit and walked towards the lake. Why didn't he come out? Why didn't he come out? Why didn't he come out? Hurry up and come out. And Lin Xiao walked into the water in a daze. Only then did she realize what she was doing. But even if she woke up, she suddenly couldn't control her body. so she could only watch herself walk down and watch the water go over her head. But her footsteps still didn't stop, and she continued to walk towards the center of the lake. What was going on? How could this be? What happened? Lin Xiao felt like an outsider as she watched Lu Tianyu's body walk down. At the same time, she also saw the world in the water. This body had already turned into a zombie, so there would be no suffocation. She could move normally in the water. She sank with her body, and when the water reached her eyes, what she saw was a sea of sparkling green. It wasn't as dark as she saw on the surface, but a sparkling green. For someone who had become colorblind, she could actually see this color. Lin Xiao was very surprised, because after she became a zombie, everything she saw was gray or black. It was monotonous and lifeless. Then why did she see this inexplicable glowing green light? Chapter 63. Before she could figure out what was going on, she suddenly felt something tighten around her feet. She felt something wrapping around her calf, and she immediately regained control of her body. But before she could react, she felt the feeling of being wrapped around her calves quickly climbing up her body. Lin Xiao looked down. It would have been better if she didn't look, but she was shocked when she saw it. She saw dense green vines crawling up her legs like snakes. In just a short while, her legs and the lower part of her waist were wrapped up. Fuck! What the hell is this? Lin Xiao's scalp tingled as she looked at these things and tried to struggle. She realized that although the vines looked terrifying, they weren't very tight around her. But the strange thing was that she couldn't break free. She tried to pull it away with her hands, but it was smooth and soft and very elastic. She couldn't pull it away at all. She couldn't even cut it with her sharp nails. The feeling of her lower body being tightly wrapped wasn't uncomfortable, but it was a little strange. She felt as if the clothes on her body had melted, because the vines seemed to be directly attached to her skin. A slight itchy and numb feeling came from his skin. She actually felt it. As a zombie, she actually felt itchy at this moment. What was going on? What the hell were these things? Before she could regain her senses, the vines had already spread to her chest and neck. Very quickly, her head was also wrapped in it, but her two dark eyes were exposed. When she was wrapped in the vines, Lin Xiao felt like she had entered a dazed state again. But this time, she wasn't dazed. She was awake. His limbs slowly relaxed along with the slight numbness and itchiness. That kind of numb and itchy feeling gradually entered her muscles from the outside of her skin. Lin Xiao felt that her current feeling was very strange. She felt like her consciousness was floating, as if it was about to float. It also felt like she was lying in a soft cloud, very comfortable. But before she could continue to enjoy this feeling, a slight pain suddenly appeared in her head. At first, it was not very uncomfortable. However, the pain was getting stronger and stronger. Lin Xiao frowned and came back to his senses. She felt the pain in her head, and it slowly became more and more uncomfortable and painful. However, there was nothing she could do. She could only endure this strange pain without being able to move. Lin Xiao was not afraid, nor could he think too much about it. This was because her mind was attracted by this sudden pain, and she couldn't think of anything else. It was different from the previous headaches that came suddenly. This time, it appeared slowly, also intermittent, as if to let you have a suitable time. It wouldn't be like before, when he couldn't bear the pain and directly fainted. Therefore, the more Lin Xiao got to the end, the more he felt like his head was splitting apart. Her expression was ferocious. She opened her mouth wide, revealing a mouthful of steel teeth and 4 sharp canines. She wanted to scream to relieve the pain in her head, but she couldn't make a sound. Therefore, she could only shout it out in her heart. It hurts. It hurts. Pain. Ah, I want to die. Towards the end, her body began to twitch, but she was firmly bound by the vines. She couldn't move at all, and she couldn't struggle in pain. Just as she was about to become numb from the pain, she didn't know how much time had passed. However, Lin Xiao didn't faint. Even though she was in so much pain that her eyes were blank and dull, she didn't faint. Just as Lin Xiao was in so much pain that she almost forgot who she was, all of a sudden, her mind felt lighter, and the sharp pain disappeared as soon as it was released. Lin Xiao, who hadn't recovered yet, opened her eyes in confusion. Suddenly, a trace of green light flashed across her eyes and then disappeared. Like a naughty little snake, it came out one moment and then disappeared the next. Then, the vines on Lin Xiao's body slowly loosened and gradually shrunk downwards. Only then did Lin Xiao come back to her senses. Her eyes flashed. The green light in her eyes grew stronger, but it only flashed a few times. Then, it became completely silent in her eyes. Lin Xiao let out a huge sigh of relief, and her expression returned to normal. She subconsciously lowered her head to look at her feet, only to see a pair of bare legs standing in a patch of dark green. He was stepping on a black ground made of some unknown soil. The green vines were gone, as if they had come out from underground, and then shrunk back into the ground. She looked left and right a few times, but couldn't see the vines. Then, she raised her head to look up. In the end, it was still a patch of green, and she couldn't see anything. Lin Xiao moved her hands, and suddenly felt her body being lifted up by something. She was familiar with this feeling. This was the buoyancy of water. She moved her hands and feet, and after realizing that there wasn't anything wrong with her body, she twisted her body and began to swim upwards. Splash! After swimming for a while, she popped her head out of the water. She looked left and right, and found that she was in the middle of the lake. She looked around, and found that Wu Yueling was standing by the lake. His eyes were fixed on her, and his eyes were a little red. That's great. She came out. Why was she still there, and why didn't she swim back? Lin Xiao sensed Wu Yueling's thoughts from afar, and she was surprised. Then, she swam in the direction of Wu Yueling. Why was this little girl so worried about her? Seeing that Lin Xiao was swimming towards the shore, Wu Yueling was greatly relieved. Her heart, which had been in her throat, finally calmed down. As Lin Xiao swam, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She seemed to be able to clearly sense everything in this entire space. Except for this lake, she didn't know how to describe that feeling. It was as if there was a space in her mind. She could see everything, sense the changes in the space, and so on. So now, even if she closed her eyes, she could clearly sense where Wu Yueling was. And the grass, the strawberries, and the messy furniture, the rabbit and the little mice that she couldn't find before, had all gone underground. She could feel a strange aura in this lake, but she didn't know what it was. When Lin Xiao finally swam to the shore and walked out of the water, only then did he realize that he was naked. Looking down, Lin Xiao was stunned again. Damn, what was going on? What had she encountered in the water just now? Chapter 64. Lin Xiao lowered her head and stared at her legs in disbelief. The skin on her legs was still the same as before, blue and white. Although the color of her skin looked a little scary, the texture of her skin was good. It was smooth and firm, and her legs were slender and straight. However, there were several bite wounds on her thighs and calves, which were so deep that her bones could be seen. But now, they were gone from her eyes. The flesh that had been bitten off from the wound on her calves had somehow grown back. It was just that this part of her skin was different from the other parts of her body. The other parts of her skin were still blue and white, but the skin on this part of the wound was pink. It was like cutting off new flesh under the old scar on a normal person's wound. Although the flesh on her thighs did not grow as much as the flesh on her calves, there was still a very obvious change. The flesh on the originally black and dead wound had all fallen off. White flesh also grew out from the broken flesh. She shifted her gaze to her abdomen. The big hole on her stomach was still there, and the intestines inside were still cut off. The wound on her chest did not change much. Lin Xiao raised her hand and touched her face. It was still bumpy and uneven. She lowered her head to look at the wound under her leg again. She was sure that she was not mistaken. Although she wanted to study the changes in her body, it was not a good idea to be naked here for a little girl to watch. She was not a pervert. Lin Xiao had to go ashore first and made a gesture to Wu Yueling to cover her eyes. She asked her not to look. Wu Yueling was originally just staring at her body curiously, so she was not afraid. Seeing that Lin Xiao did not allow her to look, she obediently picked up a small hand and covered her eyes. However, her hand was too short, so she could only cover the side. So, she peeked out another uncovered eye and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao sighed and could only move in a flash. She picked up a set of clothes that had been taken from the robbers as fast as she could and then flashed into the small space. Because she moved so fast, Wu Yueling could only see a figure flashing by with her naked eyes. In the blink of an eye, Lin Xiao's figure could not be seen. Although Lin Xiao could feel the situation in this space, she couldn't control the things in this space from a distance. So, she took the clothes into the small space and quickly put them on. Then, she walked out of the space. Lin Xiao walked over to the furniture and glanced at Wu Yueling. Seeing that she didn't see him, he went back to playing with the little bunny. He didn't bother about her. She sat on the sofa, pulled up her trousers, and carefully examined the condition of her calf. He stroked her calf a few times and found that her calf muscles had regained the elasticity that a living person should have. It turned out that the muscles on her calves had lost their activity. Once she pressed them down, they wouldn't bounce back. This was a very normal condition for zombies. Therefore, even if the zombies were injured later on, they would not die. But it would no longer heal on its own. Only top-level zombies that have grown to level 6 or above will have a little bit of automatic recovery ability. However, they might need to consume a large amount of human flesh and heart. Only then could he absorb this healing energy. However, Lin Xiao's old wounds were regenerating. This was no longer something that could be achieved through healing. Although the changes in his body started from his calves, it seemed to have spread to his thighs. Would it spread to the upper part of her body in the future? Lin Xiao put down his trousers and turned to look at the center of the lake. She knew the changes in her body. They were all caused by the vines in the center of the lake. However, she didn't understand what was going on with that kind of energy. Was it the energy of the lake itself, or was there something else hidden in the lake? What was this lake water? Where did this space come from? Lin Xiao didn't know whether the changes in her body were good or bad, and what would happen to her in the end. Would she become a normal person again? Or would she become some other strange thing? She felt that it was too unbelievable. However, looking at the condition of her calves, Lin Xiao felt that it was not impossible. Although the muscles on her calves had grown, she still used her sharp nails to prick them as she stroked them. She still didn't feel anything. The energy in the lake water was changing her body. Although she had long felt that the lake water was magical, it could actually turn dead flesh into living flesh. And the speed at which the wounds were recovering was a little scary. Even Lin Xiao was astonished by this. This wasn't a fantasy world in a novel where there was some magical herb that could heal her wounds. This was the end of the world. However, Lin Xiao herself didn't know why her body had changed like this. Then, had the virus in her body been neutralized? Or was it still in her body? Moreover, if the energy in the lake could make her turn into Lu Tianyu's original appearance, Lin Xiao narrowed her eyes. Then she would definitely be recognized by the people at Sea City Base. At that time, it would be troublesome. Even if she didn't provoke others, there would probably be others who would come to provoke her, who asked this woman to do so many evil things when she was alive. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao suddenly felt a headache. It was indeed better to stay away from Sea City. If Xiao Dian's father recognized her, it would not be fun. Lin Xiao thought of what Lu Tianyu had done to Wu Chengyue before he died. She wanted to cry and laugh at the same time. Damn it! Why did she revive in the body of this woman who was courting death? However, she had unconsciously walked into the center of the lake just now. It was as if she had been summoned. Was there a consciousness in this lake? No matter what, her current change was good. If she continued to heal in the water, would she be able to heal the wounds on her body? However, she still had a lingering fear of that intense pain and really didn't want to try it again. She decided to take it easy first. She didn't want to torture herself now. Moreover, she was summoned this time, and it wasn't her own initiative. If she took the initiative to go down, she didn't know if the energy at the bottom of the lake would react. This still needed to be verified. After thinking for a long time, Lin Xiao finally gave up on studying the energy source of the lake. She closed her eyes and looked outside, sensing the location of the level 5 zombie. With this action, she found that her sensing ability had increased a lot. Her field of vision, which could only see this area, seemed to have increased a little. She could see a wider area. She could even feel the aura of a level 5 zombie, as well as other auras. Lin Xiao thought about how to make herself invisible and slip away from the zombie leader's eyes. At this moment, a voice in her heart told her that something was wrong. She could go out as long as she closed her eyes. Then, Lin Xiao inexplicably followed this thought and closed her eyes. She shouted in her heart, "Get out!" Chapter 65. Just as she finished her thought, Lin Xiao saw a flash in front of her. She came out. Lin Xiao stood in the woods in a daze. It was the same place she went in before. The surroundings were a mess after being tortured by the level 5 zombie leader. She subconsciously looked up at the position of the level 5 zombie leader and immediately went into a defensive state. She was waiting for the zombie leader to rush down from above. But when she looked up, she found that there was no movement above her. The level 5 zombie was still quietly squatting above, without any reaction. It was as if it didn't see her appear. Shit! What was going on? Could it be that this fellow was blind? She was such a big person. Such a big zombie was standing here. Why didn't it come down to attack her? It was still chasing her? Lin Xiao saw that the zombie leader above didn't move, so she unintentionally looked down at her body. What he saw stunned him yet again. What the hell was this? How did her body become like this? Looking at her body that had become like a transparent bag, Lin Xiao was also dumbfounded. She raised her hand in disbelief and flicked her claws. Xiao! The sharp nails still popped out and even cut a little in the air. It seemed to feel that there was some movement in the air below. The zombie leader squatting high in the tree looked down at Lin Xiao's position, but he couldn't see anything. It looked left and right strangely. Then it didn't care anymore. Lin Xiao felt its little movement and also looked up at it. But it seemed that the zombie didn't notice her existence. Realizing her current situation, she was very surprised. She didn't expect that she really did it and successfully came out from the space. Seeing this, Lin Xiao immediately lifted her feet and gently moved to the side. Gotcha! She stepped on a dry branch, and the branch broke with a slight sound. She immediately froze and stopped abruptly. She looked up, and sure enough, this slight sound immediately attracted the attention of the zombie leader above. She saw that it was staring with its black eyes, which flashed a strange red light from time to time. It was staring closely at Lin Xiao's feet. It looked very confused and curious. Seeing that it didn't rush down immediately, Lin Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that she couldn't make any noise. However, she couldn't guarantee that the masked man wouldn't just pounce on her to see what was going on. She gently retracted her foot and observed the terrain beneath her feet. She stepped on the thick leaves of grass and did not make any more sounds. She raised her head to observe the zombie leader and found that it did not notice her actions. Thus, she continued to move to the side. After taking a few silent steps, she turned around to take a look. He noticed that the fellow was still staring at the spot where he had broken the branch. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He turned his head and continued to leave quietly. She nervously walked out of the road and ran silently for a mile or two. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. At this time, she was worried. She had gone invisible, but she had also escaped. The zombie leader was still foolishly guarding there, waiting for her to appear again from the space. But how was she going to get rid of her current state? Lin Xiao touched her arm. She could touch herself. Then what was with this transparent bag color? Did she have to enter the space again and then come out again? Thinking about it, Lin Xiao immediately flashed into the space. As soon as she entered the space, she saw that her body had become solid. Black training clothes, black gun, and her pale hands and pale skin. Seeing that she had returned to her original appearance, Lin Xiao had an idea. She flashed out of the space in front of her eyes. Sure enough, once she came out this time, she really appeared. It was not that transparent state. So this was the way to get rid of invisibility. But she still had to confirm that state just now, in case she could use it in the future. This was a high-level skill. She had to be proficient in controlling it. Lin Xiao flashed into the space again, then closed her eyes to sense the outside world. Then she continued to close her eyes and thought of something. She flashed out just like that. She looked down and saw that she was transparent again. She continued to return to the space and opened her eyes to take a look. After trying a few times, Lin Xiao finally figured it out. If she wanted to be invisible, she had to be in the space. She closed her eyes to sense the outside world first, then closed her eyes and used her mind to make herself come out of the space. In this way, she would be in this invisible and transparent state, and when she returned to the space, she would immediately get rid of it. So this was the trick. It was the eyes. Lin Xiao came out of the space again. She released Xie Dong's car. Then she entered the space again and appeared directly next to Wu Yueling. She now found another skill, which was that when she entered this space, she could appear from any position she wanted. So now, she could directly appear next to Wu Yueling. Seeing Lin Xiao's sudden appearance, Wu Yueling opened her eyes wide and looked at her curiously. Lin Xiao looked down at her, and then gently held one of her hands. She pointed to the sky with her other hand. Then Lin Xiao brought Wu Yueling and the rabbit in her arms out of the space. The two of them directly appeared in the car. As soon as Lin Xiao came out, she put Wu Yueling on the passenger seat. Wu Yueling suddenly felt her vision blur. When she could see clearly again, she found herself in another place. She tensed up her little face a little nervously, looking left and right. When she saw that she was sitting in a car, she looked out of the window. Then she saw an unfamiliar forest and a big road outside. As soon as she arrived in an unfamiliar environment, Wu Yueling became nervous. She straightened her back and tightly hugged the rabbit in her arms. Her eyes kept looking around, and her body was restlessly twisting here and there. In the end, her eyes would be fixed on Lin Xiao. Seeing her like this, Lin Xiao knew that she was insecure. She bent down to pull out the seatbelt and fastened it for her. After fastening the seatbelt, she looked at Wu Yueling. She used hand gestures to tell her, and said in her heart, "I'll bring you out to play, so that you won't be bored in there. It's okay. It's very safe here." Lin Xiao thought that she was driving on this road now. The zombies she encountered were not as many and densely packed as in the city, so it wasn't that dangerous for Tiny Tot. She just wanted to let this little girl out for a walk. But she didn't expect her reaction to be so big. Looking at Tiny Tot's slightly tense body, Lin Xiao could only use her hand to touch her head. Then she sat back, started the car, and prepared to drive. She couldn't help it. This child was autistic. The environment had a great impact on her, so it was inevitable that she was nervous. But she couldn't let this little girl stay in that space all the time. She still had to come out to see the new environment. Chapter 66. Lin Xiao didn't know if Xie Dong was nearby, but she didn't have time to look for him. In any case, she had already told him to head south. Maybe he would bump into her. She drove in the direction that Xie Dong had told her to go. Originally, she wanted to go back from the bridge and take another road to the front. But now that Xie Dong was gone, Lin Xiao had to take out the previous map to study. There was a small town next to it. She had to take a detour of at least 30 miles to get to the highway heading south from another highway. Lin Xiao looked at the road sign and drove the car to the small town. Half an hour later, Lin Xiao finally arrived at the entrance of the small town. The closer she got to the small town, the more zombies she saw. It was just the ordinary zombies that heard Lin Xiao's car sound. They were immediately attracted over and could even smell Wu Yueling's fragrance in the car. But they didn't dare to come over, because the car had Lin Xiao's smell. After half an hour of driving, Wu Yueling's mood had calmed down. She didn't straighten her body, but curled up on the seat. She stared at the scenery outside the window. The gray rabbit was quietly nestled on her leg, letting her touch the fur on its back. Lin Xiao drove the car into the small town. She looked at the road sign and the map she laid on the steering wheel. After turning left and right for a while, she reached the center of the small town. It was also the most prosperous part of the town. She could see the streets, buildings, parks, and residential areas. After passing through here, she could go to another road. After walking for another 7 or 8 kilometers, she could enter another provincial road. Then, she could go to the highway not far from the provincial road. As Lin Xiao was driving, her ears suddenly moved. She seemed to have heard some movement in the residential area not far from her. When the car got closer and closer, Lin Xiao received some intermittent messages. "So hungry. So hungry. There is food here. There is food here. Rush here. There is food here. So hungry. So hungry, so hungry. Delicious, delicious, delicious. When Lin Xiao heard these simple messages, she knew that these were the instinctive thoughts of the ordinary zombies. What made her feel strange was that there were many similar instinctive thoughts coming from that direction, but they didn't seem to be coming from the same zombie. There seemed to be a lot of them. So hungry. Wanna eat. Wanna eat. So hungry. There's food. There's food here. Hungry. Just as Lin Xiao was feeling strange, a different piece of information suddenly rushed into his mind, mixed in with the other pieces of information. Roar. Get away from me. Scram, scram, scram. An irritated roar came from afar, causing Lin Xiao to stop curiously. She could sense the emotions in the voice. It was extremely irritable and anxious. She could understand his irritation, but why was he anxious? Listening to that sound, it was obviously made by a zombie. However, its voice seemed to be directed at other zombies. The more Lin Xiao listened, the more curious she became. She could faintly smell a different scent. She turned to look at Wu Yueling. He decided to go and have a look. That was because that aura was the aura of a human. Lin Xiao turned the car around and drove toward the source of the information. Just as he drove the car into the gate of the district, he saw a large group of ordinary zombies. They were surrounding the staircase of a small building and seemed to want to rush in, but it seemed to be blocked by something. Eat. Eat. Wanna eat. Wanna eat. Delicious. Delicious. Hungry. Eat. There's food. There's food. There's food. There's food. As soon as he arrived here, Lin Xiao's mind sensed more information. It made her feel a little headache. Lin Xiao stopped the car and turned to look at Wu Yueling. Wu Yueling had already begun to feel nervous when she saw so many zombies. Seeing Lin Xiao looking at her, she also stared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao unfastened the seatbelt for her. However, her action startled Wu Yueling. Wu Yueling held Lin Xiao's hand tightly, not letting her unfasten the seatbelt. She raised her head, tightly pursed her lips, and stared at Lin Xiao with red eyes, begging. She was afraid that after Lin Xiao unfastened the seatbelt, she would be thrown into the group of zombies. Lin Xiao gestured to her and sent words to her through her eyes. I'll take you into the space, don't be afraid. She didn't know if Wu Yueling heard her words or understood her gestures or eyes. She let go of her hand and obediently let Lin Xiao unfasten her seatbelt. After Lin Xiao unfastened the seatbelt, she grabbed the two people and flashed away. Then she disappeared from the car. Roar. Get out. Get out. He didn't know if it had sensed Lin Xiao's aura, but the zombie that had been very irritable before suddenly stopped moving. Now it seemed to be even more irritable. After Lin Xiao brought Tiny Tot into the space, she immediately flashed out again. She directly opened the door of the car and walked out. She turned around and walked towards the group of zombies. Those ordinary zombies surrounding the periphery, with tattered clothes and rotten wounds all over their bodies, sensed Lin Xiao's approach. They all subconsciously retreated slowly. As soon as Lin Xiao got out of the car, she smelled the fragrance of a living person. There was indeed a living person here. At the end of the world, there were often living people who were forced into a room or a corner by a dense group of zombies. Separated by a door, they could either wait for death or wait for zombies to break through the door and rush in, or wait for other zombie hunting teams to come, so that they might have a way to survive. After 5 years of wind and snow, the end of the world was no longer like the beginning year. All the major bases sent out search and rescue teams to save people. Now, if they met human beings, it would be best if it was the regular army of the base. Even if it was a zombie hunting team, it would be better. After all, the situation was not that bad. But if it was those robbers, they might as well kill themselves. But this time, Lin Xiao was curious about the very irritable emotional message. What kind of zombie did it come from? She felt that the voice was anxious and irritated, and it seemed to be protecting something. So it didn't let the zombies in front of her go up. As Lin Xiao got closer and closer, those ordinary zombies gradually made a way for her. But it was unwilling to leave here, so it continued to roar at the middle of the stairs, reaching out in the air as if it wanted to grab something. Roar! At the same time, the strange zombies' roar also revealed a strong vigilance. Even if it was very irritable before, it didn't seem to be so vigilant. Although she didn't know what it was anxious about, it was certainly not for these ordinary zombies. This made Lin Xiao feel even more strange. She passed the zombies who gave way to her and walked towards the stairs. Only then did she find that there was a protective iron door at the stairs. No wonder these zombies couldn't get in. It turned out to be protected by an iron door. Chapter 67. When the zombies were all oppressed by Lin Xiao's aura, they all retreated from the iron door. Lin Xiao then saw the situation inside clearly. She saw a female zombie with disheveled hair standing inside the iron door. Her face was still intact, but her eyes were purplish-black, her face was pale, and her lips were dark purple. She was baring her sharp teeth. A pair of gray eyes stared at Lin Xiao's direction with vigilance. The female zombie looked to be 27 or 28 years old. From her intact face, it could be seen that she was a beautiful woman, but she was too thin, and her cheekbones were sunken. She wasn't tall, about 1.65 meters. She was wearing a business suit, but it was a very fashionable and simple style. It didn't look cheap. About 1 or 2,000 yuan. She stood inside the door with bare feet. Seeing Lin Xiao come closer, she vigilantly took a step back, but didn't immediately turn around and leave. Lin Xiao raised her head and sniffed. She smelled that the smell came from one of the rooms on the left of the second floor. That person should be on the second floor. But the female zombie behind the iron door didn't follow the smell and rush up. Instead, she wanted to come out of the iron door. She stared at the female zombie for a moment and found that although this female zombie looked like a zombie, her body didn't look dirty. Except for the white shirt on the shoulder that was stained with blood, the rest of the body remained neat. Although there was some dust, it didn't feel like other zombies were covered in blood. And looking at this zombie's expression, it seemed to have a bit of intelligence. Lin Xiao recognized from its aura, this was a level 2 zombie that was about to become a level 3 intelligent zombie. Roar dash, seeing Lin Xiao approaching. This level 2 zombie let out a low roar from her throat. Although there was a strong fear of Lin Xiao in the voice, it also warned Lin Xiao not to come closer. Lin Xiao couldn't help but admire this zombie. It was obviously very afraid of her, but it refused to leave and even warned her. Did it mean that it didn't want her to go upstairs? Or did it mean that it didn't want her to get close to that living person? It was afraid that she would go up and eat that person. She could clearly feel the female zombie's desire to protect that person. This made Lin Xiao feel very surprised. There were zombies that wanted to protect humans. Moreover, how did it control its instinct to not eat that person? Lin Xiao thought while ignoring the female zombie's roar. He walked to the iron door and waved his claws at the lock. Then, the lock opened with a clang. She pushed the door open and walked in. Ow! The female zombie looked at the door lock that Lin Xiao suddenly cut open. It had been working on the lock for a long time, but it still couldn't open it. As soon as they arrived, they immediately opened it. Roar! But when she saw Lin Xiao come in, she became very impatient. Step by step, it retreated to the back of the stairs. It really wanted to block Lin Xiao's path, but Lin Xiao's aura was too strong, giving it a very oppressive sense of crisis. Therefore, it did not dare to move recklessly, for fear that it would move. It was destroyed by Lin Xiao, but it couldn't let Lin Xiao go upstairs because there was something it had to protect. As a result, one advancing and one retreating, the two zombies slowly retreated up the stairs. There was also a large group of ordinary zombies behind them, but they couldn't walk well. They swayed, not to mention going up the stairs. They didn't even take 2 steps before falling down. They also pushed down the same kind next to them. Therefore, the group of zombies who just walked 2 or 3 stairs were in a mess. Roar! Don't come over! The female zombie retreated and anxiously roared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at this zombie with slight surprise. It could actually sense her clear thoughts. It could clearly convey her thoughts and thoughts. This meant that this zombie's intelligence was really not low. Since this was the case, could she communicate with it normally? Lin Xiao stopped to show that she was not hostile. She roared at the female zombie and asked, "Ow? Can you understand me?" The female zombie saw that Lin Xiao stopped, but she didn't let down her guard. But after hearing Lin Xiao's question, she was stunned. Roar! Understand what? Lin Xiao looked at it with some surprise. It could actually understand her words. She continued to ask, "Ow? Do you still remember who you are?" This question immediately made the female zombie show a confused expression. It let out a low cry from its throat. "Wheeze, who am I? Who am I? Who am I?" But Lin Xiao could only hear it keep repeating this question, and also felt the confusion in its heart. It seemed that this zombie didn't have the memory of its previous life. It should have forgotten who it was. Lin Xiao silently looked at the female zombie who kept repeating who she was, and roared at her again, "Ow? Do you know what you are now?" The female zombie was roared by her, and came back to her senses, but it knew what Lin Xiao meant. "Ow, ow, ow. I know. I became a zombie. I'm dead." Lin Xiao suddenly turned around and roared at the ordinary zombies that were coming over, and there was a little anger in her voice. Those zombies were roared by her and staggered back, but because of the stairs under their feet, they fell down again. Lin Xiao looked at these stupid zombies. She was speechless. After Lin Xiao saw them rolling down, she turned around and roared at the female zombie, "Ow, you lost your memory?" The female zombie looked at Lin Xiao and then nodded with a complicated expression. In fact, when she woke up a few days ago, she knew that she became a zombie. She knew that it was the end of the world, and she also knew a lot of common sense. But she had forgotten her own name. She didn't know who she was, and no one told her. There was only a bunch of zombies with no IQ here, and she couldn't communicate with them. In addition to these zombies with no IQ, she knew that there was a human on the second floor. But it was just a child, a very small child. As soon as she saw the child, a strong sense of kinship and protectiveness welled up in her heart. She immediately realized that this child could be her child. Otherwise, she wouldn't have this feeling. More importantly, the child called her mom. Although the smell of the child made her feel very hungry, but whenever she wanted to eat the child, there was a voice telling her, "You can't eat it, you can't eat it." Not only can she not eat it, she also has to protect it. She can't let other zombies come up to eat it. But the child's situation was not good. The child had nothing to eat, no water, and was thirsty. He was so hungry that he fell into a coma. She was very anxious. She wanted to go out and find food for him, but she didn't dare to leave him here alone. More importantly, she couldn't open the iron door downstairs. So she wanted to go out through the door these days, but she couldn't. Although she became a zombie, she was only a low-level zombie. Although her consciousness was still clear, her hands and feet were not very flexible. She was just a little better than those ordinary zombies. At least she wouldn't wobble when walking. Chapter 68. Lin Xiao could sense her complicated thoughts and knew her situation. This zombie was a newborn, but it had only been a few days. This level of agility was already very good, and it still retained its consciousness, although it was a bit incomplete. But this zombie was protecting the human on the second floor. It seemed that this guy could still be saved. "Roar Dash, you are protecting the person on the second floor." Lin Xiao looked at her and said with certainty, "Roar Dash, you can't eat him. He is my child." Hearing Lin Xiao mention the person on the second floor, the female zombie immediately became anxious. She roared at Lin Xiao. Originally, she didn't know whether it was good or bad to meet a zombie that she could communicate with. If Lin Xiao was a human and not a robber, then she could silently let her take the child away. But this zombie was a higher level than her, even if it wasn't intentional. But she didn't dare to be careless. Now the other party really came for the child, and there was only one purpose for zombies: to get close to humans. The female zombie stared at Lin Xiao nervously, thinking that if the child was going to be eaten by this high-level zombie. She actually didn't feel afraid of Lin Xiao. She just thought about how to stop Lin Xiao from getting close to the child. Lin Xiao nodded and looked at the female zombie. Although the other party's body looked very good, there was a strong maternal love exuding from her. This was a strange aura that a woman who had never given birth to a child wouldn't have. "Roar Dash, don't worry. I won't eat people. But your child's breath is very weak." She roared at the female zombie. In her senses, the child's breath was very weak, just like when she first met Wu Yueling. Hearing Lin Xiao said that the child's breath was very weak, the female zombie immediately showed a worried expression. But she still couldn't believe Lin Xiao, and still stared at her. Lin Xiao knew what this female zombie was worried about. She thought about it and suddenly shouted at the female zombie. Roar dash, suddenly, he shouted at the female zombie. Roar dash, wait a minute. Then she disappeared in front of the female zombie. This, equals underscore equals? This, equals underscore equals? This time, the female zombie was dumbfounded again. After Lin Xiao entered the space, she saw Wu Yueling sitting on the sofa. She looked at Wu Yueling and temporarily ignored her. He found a clean bowl and walked to the lake to wash it. Then, he scooped a bowl of water and left the space. When the female zombies outside were stunned by Lin Xiao's disappearance, the zombies below were no longer suppressed by Lin Xiao. He immediately began to rush up again. Roar dashed, the female zombie immediately recovered and roared at the zombies. As soon as he finished shouting, Lin Xiao appeared out of thin air in a flash. Female zombie. All the ordinary zombies. Fuck, was this high-level zombie messing with them? Lin Xiao took out a piece of paper and showed it to the female zombie. She wrote on it, "This is clean water. You can give it to your child to drink first. If you still want to save him, you better let me see him. Otherwise, you can just wait for him to die." The female zombie looked at the words and her face changed. She could understand, but she didn't know if she should believe Lin Xiao. However, Lin Xiao was right. The child's breath was very weak. If he didn't think of a way, he might not be able to save him. At such a critical moment, Lin Xiao gave them a way out. He let her choose whether to believe it or not. Lin Xiao didn't rush her and just raised the bowl of water. He looked at her quietly and waited calmly. After the female zombie struggled for a while, she helplessly chose to believe Lin Xiao. Because apart from this, she really couldn't think of any other way. She couldn't go out to find food and drink, nor could she carry the child out. She took the water from Lin Xiao and roared at Lin Xiao. Roar dash, you can't get too close. Then, she walked up worriedly, looking back at Lin Xiao behind her. Lin Xiao nodded to her. She kept a distance of 3 to 4 meters and followed behind her. She came here to save people, so of course, she couldn't provoke him. The female zombie saw that Lin Xiao kept a little distance from her and felt a little relieved. Then she walked up to the second floor and continued to walk down the corridor. Lin Xiao followed her and saw her stop in front of the last room. Then she raised her hand to open the door and walked in. When she walked to the door, Lin Xiao didn't go in directly. Instead, she stayed at the door and waited, but her eyes were looking inside. But Lin Xiao only saw a living room because there were 2 bedroom doors inside. And the female zombie went into one of the bedroom. Lin Xiao stood at the door and waited for a while. He saw that the female zombie went into the room and there was a human presence coming out. He didn't know how the female zombie fed the water, but she came out after a while. Holding the empty bowl, she stood at the door of the room and stared at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at the ordinary zombie door that slowly appeared behind her, then walked in. She turned around and closed the door, locking it. Then she disappeared from the living room, leaving the female zombie standing there with a surprised face. Before she could finish being surprised, she saw a tall and short figure appear in an instant. Looking at the little girl next to Lin Xiao, the female zombie widened her horrifying eyes. After Wu Yueling was brought out by Lin Xiao, she was a little uncomfortable. After seeing the female zombie standing in front of her, she subconsciously hid behind Lin Xiao's legs. The female zombie never thought that Lin Xiao would bring another person with her. As soon as she smelled the unfamiliar smell of the little girl, she immediately had the urge to pounce and bite her. But reason made her suppress this impulse. Towards this unfamiliar little girl, her heart didn't have that strong feeling of resistance. Cough. Lin Xiao looked at the female zombie's expression and lightly coughed. The female zombie came back to her senses, and then she opened her eyes wide, looking at Lin Xiao, and then looked at Wu Yueling, who was at ease hiding behind her. Confused again. What's going on? Why would the other side be a zombie, but bring a human child with them? Could it be that this child is also her child? And seeing that this child is very dependent on the other side, Lin Xiao received all of the female zombie's thoughts. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she thought that she was the little one's mother. Don't know if the other side knew that this little one was abducted by her. What kind of eyes would they use to look at her? And her body was stronger than the other side's father. She took out a pen and wrote on the book. You should see that I have space. This child has been in my space. There is water and food. You let your child in, and then you follow me. Who are you going to give your child to? Is her father still alive? After the female zombie saw her words, her eyes darkened. She shook her head. She didn't know. She didn't remember anyone. She didn't remember herself. She didn't remember her family and friends. She didn't remember who the child's father was. So she didn't know who to give this child to. She wanted to keep it with her, but she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control herself and would bite him. Chapter 69. Lin Xiao glanced at her and wrote on the notebook with a pen. Since you don't remember anything, take the child with you first. With me here, I won't let you hurt the child. The female zombie looked at Lin Xiao unexpectedly. She didn't expect Lin Xiao to see through her thoughts, but she didn't know that Lin Xiao really knew what she was thinking, and it was clear. The female zombie thought Lin Xiao was just guessing. Lin Xiao wrote on the notebook, maybe I can help you send the child to live in a base. The survivor base is a place where humans live. The children follow you and me, the two zombies. The child is not safe with you and me. The female zombie nodded. She knew. Sending the child to the base was the best way. But she was reluctant. She felt that this was her child. Why should she give it to others? But if she didn't send it to the base, she couldn't raise the child in her current condition. But she really didn't want to send the child away from her. Lin Xiao looked at her and knew the mentality of a mother. He thought about it and wrote on the notebook, since you don't want to send it away, it's not impossible to keep it with you. But it might be dangerous. And if you want to protect him, then you have to improve your strength. In this apocalypse, no matter if it was a human or a zombie, without strength, you can't protect others. You can't even protect yourself. The female zombie looked at Lin Xiao blankly. She didn't know how to improve her strength. Although she became a zombie, she didn't know how to improve her strength. Lin Xiao looked at the room behind her and didn't write on the notebook. Instead, he asked her with his eyes if he could go in and see the child. He also wanted to know the female zombie's next decision. If she let him in, it meant that the female zombie was willing to take the child with her. The female zombie stared at Lin Xiao for a few seconds. After struggling in her heart for a while, she moved 2 steps to the side and gave way to the door. Lin Xiao saw this and walked over with Xiao Budian. He passed her and entered the room. In fact, the items in the room that the female zombie stayed in were not very messy. Maybe it hadn't been swept by survivors before. There were still a lot of intact items and furniture. After entering the room, he saw a small person lying on the bed in the bedroom. When he got closer, it was a little boy. She was 1 or 2 years younger than Wu Yueling. She looked about 3 years old. Her sleeping face looked very thin and sallow. The flesh on his face was sunken and his eye sockets were dark. Moreover, he was as skinny as a 2-year-old child. It was obvious that he had been malnourished for a long time. The female zombie walked to the other side of the bed and looked at the child. When she saw Lin Xiao reach out to the child on the bed, her heart tensed up. But in next to no time, she noticed that Lin Xiao's fingers were completely clean, and there weren't any sharp jet-black claws. Only then did he feel slightly relieved. Lin Xiao used her finger to feel the pulse on the side of the child's neck and found that it was very weak. It seemed like it would disappear at any moment. She withdrew her hand and was about to check on the child's physical condition. Suddenly, she saw something strange in her eyes. Lin Xiao steadied his expression. His black eyes, which had no white in his eyes, were glinting with a cold light as he stared at the child's stomach. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. The female zombie was nervously observing Lin Xiao. She was afraid that Lin Xiao would suddenly hurt the child on the bed. At this time, she found that Lin Xiao's expression had become strange, and she immediately tensed up. Lin Xiao felt that she was a little panicked. Her eyes were still staring at the child's stomach, but on the other side, he slightly raised his hand and made a soothing gesture to the female zombie to calm her down. At this time, Lin Xiao's eyes were looking at the child's stomach. She saw a very, very light green swimming in the child's stomach. She didn't know what it was, but it looked a little familiar. In order to confirm this, she bent down slightly. She lifted the child's quilt with her hand. Then she covered the child's abdomen with the palm of her hand. Sure enough, she felt a familiar energy from her palm. It was the kind of energy she felt when she was tortured to death in the center of the lake. Lin Xiao closed her eyes and carefully felt for more than 10 seconds, and finally confirmed one thing. It was this slight energy that was restoring the almost exhausted vitality in the child's stomach. It seemed that this energy was the bowl of water that she had just given to the female zombie. She opened her eyes and took her hand back. She took out a notebook and wrote a paragraph in her hand. The water I gave you has a healing effect. Now it is slowly restoring the child's vitality. He will probably wake up in 3 or 4 hours. You take him and go with me. I still have to rush to the south. There is no time to delay for too long. When the female zombie saw Lin Xiao's words and saw that she said that the bowl of water had a healing effect, her gray eyes lit up. She looked at Lin Xiao with expectation and surprise, and she couldn't believe it. Lin Xiao nodded to her and spread out her hands. She let her choose whether to leave with her or not. She didn't know that there was this kind of energy in the lake before. Now that her body was changed by the lake, she was also very surprised that she could see the energy contained in the lake. What was going on? What happened to her? Seeing the female zombie's surprised eyes, Lin Xiao just shrugged. Then she wrote another sentence for her to see. I want to take all the things in this room into the space and take them away. I can use them anyway. The female zombie nodded. After the end of the world, who would care about whose things in the room belonged to? Anyway, no one would come to take them if they were left here. After Lin Xiao saw that she didn't mind, she turned around and left the bed. She began to sweep the room. Xiao Budian had been sticking to her leg. When she came in, she also saw the little boy on the bed. She immediately stared at him curiously. There seemed to be a strange attraction in front of children of the same age. So when Wu Yueling saw the little boy who was a little younger than her attention shifted from the female zombie to the little boy. At this time, seeing that Lin Xiao was going to walk around to collect things, she quickly reached out to pull her pants and followed closely beside her. But as she followed Lin Xiao, her eyes kept looking back at the little boy on the bed. Lin Xiao first looked around the bedroom, looking at the cups and kettles on the table and so on. Everything that her hand touched would disappear into thin air. If it was a human who came to collect these things, it would be understandable. But a zombie also came to collect these things. It felt strange. She opened the wardrobe and saw that there were a lot of clothes inside. There were both adults and children, although not many. However, the children's clothes seemed to be just right for the little boy lying on the bed to wear. After Lin Xiao saw it, she directly put the clothes together with the wardrobe into the space. Chapter 70. After cleaning up all the chairs and tables in the room, Lin Xiao looked at the bed. She turned around and left the room. She began to put away all the furniture and supplies in the living room and other rooms. She didn't let go of the kitchen either. They were all put away. Xiedong was here. At least Xiedong could help her start the fire. Now that Xiedong was gone, what she needed was a fire. After Lin Xiao emptied the whole room, she returned to the bedroom again. The female zombie was still standing in the original position, staring at the child on the bed. Lin Xiao walked closer to the child's body condition. The light green energy was almost used up. The death energy in the little boy's body was a lot less than before. His internal organs were emitting a vitality that wasn't there before. She wrote a few words on the paper. I will put him into the space now, if you are worried. You can go in with me. She handed the paper to the female zombie and let her see. After the female zombie saw it, she nodded to show her agreement. Lin Xiao walked to her side, reached out and pressed her shoulder. The two of them flashed and disappeared in place. The female zombie's eyes were originally colorless. It was gray. After a flash, when she opened her eyes again, she saw a meadow. But it was also gray. She turned around in surprise and found that the space was very big. Not only was there a meadow, there was also a lake. The female zombie also saw a pile of furniture on the meadow, some of it from her previous house. There were also others she hadn't seen before. Lin Xiao wrote another sentence on the paper. You wait here. I will bring the child in with the bed. She didn't wait for the female zombie to respond and disappeared with Wu Yueling. The female zombie saw that she suddenly disappeared, and her expression immediately became nervous. She turned around in a circle, but didn't see Lin Xiao's figure. She could only suppress her emotions and pray in her heart that Lin Xiao wouldn't lie to her. Fortunately, she didn't wait for a few seconds. A bed appeared in front of her out of thin air, but there was no one on the bed. But then Lin Xiao also appeared. She held the boy in one hand and the little girl in the other. Lin Xiao let go of Wu Yueling and let her run to the side. She turned around and put the little boy on the bed. The female zombie saw that Lin Xiao had brought the child in just as she had said. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Seeing that she was relieved, Lin Xiao took out a piece of paper and wrote, "My name is Lin Xiao. Give yourself a name. If you can remember what you were called before." The female zombie shook her head. She really couldn't remember. But as for giving a name to himself, when he saw this question just now, two words flashed through her mind, Junjun. Lin Xiao sensed her thoughts, so she wrote Junjun on the paper and showed it to her. After the female zombie looked at it, she nodded. Then she suddenly looked at Lin Xiao strangely. She just thought of these two words in her mind for a moment. How did this high-level zombie know? She had a strange feeling since just now, even though she didn't notice it. But now, when she saw Lin Xiao write the word Junjun, she suddenly realized the problem. After Lin Xiao sensed her current thoughts, she wrote on the paper again, "I can sense the thoughts of all low-level zombies, including you." She felt that she didn't need to hide this. Anyway, even if Junjun knew, nothing would happen. But she didn't tell Junjun that she could also sense the thoughts of humans. Moreover, she herself did not know whether this was considered her special ability or not, or the ability that zombies should have. Junjun stared at her with a face full of surprise. Was this what high-level zombies could do? Or only she could do it? Lin Xiao didn't say too much to her. She turned around and looked at the position of the bed. She suddenly picked up the child again. Under Junjun's puzzled gaze, she walked in front of her and stuffed the child into her arms. She hooked her hand at her, motioning her to follow her. Then, like Hercules, she easily dragged the bed into the small space. Junjun carefully held the child and followed behind Lin Xiao. When he saw the direction she was going, he looked forward. Then he saw a dark hole. It felt a little strange to call it a hole because there was white fog around it. But in the middle of the white fog, there was a hole that was more than 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. It was like a door. Junjun watched as Lin Xiao easily flipped the 2-meter-long bed over and placed it on its side. The words female hero flashed through her mind. Thinking about it again, the word zombie should be added, and Lin Xiao should be called female paper zombie. After Lin Xiao moved the bed into the hole, she regretted it because she should first move the things inside. There wasn't a lot of space inside, but as soon as the bed was put in, there was no room for other things. As a result, there were a few barrels of gasoline and a bunch of miscellaneous things in the empty space where the bed was blocking the hole. She still had to move the barrels of gasoline out. The problem was that the bed was fucking stuck. Lin Xiao stood on the bed and silently looked at the barrels of oil inside. Now she could only carry the oil over the bed. Junjun stood outside the hole and poked her head in to see Lin Xiao at a loss. But she couldn't help with the child in her arms. She could only look at the environment in this small space curiously. At the same time, she thought it was strange. Why was there a small space in Lin Xiao's space? Could it be a double space? Lin Xiao helplessly and laboriously carried the things in the space out from the bed. After he moved the bed to a suitable position, he stuffed all the junk under the bed. After that, she waved to Junjun. Then she pointed to the bed and motioned for her to carry the child in and put him on the bed. Junjun immediately walked in and carried the child to the bedside. Then she bent down and gently put the child on the bed. At this moment, the eyes of the little boy who had just laid on the bed suddenly trembled, and then he slowly opened his eyes. A pair of gray and lifeless eyes saw Junjun's zombie face. But there was no reaction of fear. Instead, a ray of light flashed in his eyes. Then he opened his mouth and shouted, "Mom!" His voice was weak, but there was a strong sense of dependence. As soon as Junjun heard his voice, her zombie heart softened. So even if she didn't remember everyone, she wouldn't forget this feeling. It was as if this child was the flesh of her heart. Seeing that the little boy had woken up, Lin Xiao looked at him in surprise. She saw that the child's eyes were dim and lifeless. When he looked at Junjun, who had changed, There was no alienation or fear in his eyes. Lin Xiao took out a piece of paper and wrote a sentence, but she didn't show it to her. Instead, she stuffed it into her hands, took the bowl that she had given to Junjun, turned around, and walked out of the small space. Chapter 71. Junjun picked up the note she had given her and flipped it open. She saw a few sentences written on it. There are strawberries in my space that can be eaten by humans. I'm going to pick them now. Also, the water that the child drank was from the lake. The lake water has a healing effect on the child, and it has a similar effect on zombies. You can go to the lake and get water to drink. It will improve your condition a lot. When Lin Xiao took the bowl to the strawberry field to pick a few big strawberries, Wu Yueling followed her with her rabbit. Although she didn't know why this zombie sister brought another strange zombie in, she also saw the little boy being carried in by them. Maybe it was because there were only her and Lin Xiao in the space, but suddenly there were strangers. Wu Yueling felt insecure again, so she wanted to follow Lin Xiao. She saw Lin Xiao come out and walk to the strawberry field. Wu Yueling also scurried over. When Lin Xiao picked a few big strawberries and put them in the bowl, she glanced at Wu Yueling, who ran behind her. Then she walked to the lake. After a while, Lin Xiao sent the washed strawberries into the space. Seeing Lin Xiao come in, Junjun, who was sitting on the bed, looked at the bowl in her hand. She saw that the strawberries were very big, although she couldn't see the color. But such a big strawberry didn't look normal at first glance. It was obviously a mutation. Junjun looked at Lin Xiao hesitantly. She didn't know if this strange fruit could be given to the child. Seeing her look, Lin Xiao knew what Junjun meant without sensing it. She pointed to Wu Yueling outside, took out a piece of paper and wrote, "That child has been eating this all the time. You can rest assured. You can also go and see if she eats it." Junjun looked at the strawberry in her hand and decided to stand up with the little boy in her arms. She walked out of the space to see Wu Yueling. Sure enough, she saw Wu Yueling holding a strawberry and eating it. Relieved, she turned around and walked to Lin Xiao. The little boy woke up, but he kept clinging to Junjun. He held her neck with both hands, not caring about the dirty clothes and the pool of blood on Junjun's body. But when he turned around and saw Lin Xiao's disfigured appearance, he was scared. She turned around and buried her face in Junjun's neck. "Boo-hoo!" she cried as she hid. But he didn't dare to cry too loudly. Zombie Chow Lin, who accidentally scared other people's children. Why are you crying? Why did she want to look like this? After all, this was his body. She had already become like this when she woke up. It was all her fault. Seeing that the little boy was crying, Junjun felt a pang of heartache. But she couldn't coax him, so she could only pat his back. It was a simple consolation. Lin Xiao had no choice but to pass the bowl to her and walk out. Before he left her with another sentence. "You guys stay here for now. I'm out driving. If you want to find me, just yell at me. I can hear it." Junjun looked at her words and then at the strawberry in her hand. She then looked at the little boy in her arms. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to give it to the child. Anyway, she just saw that the child outside was also eating, completely fine. She gently touched the little boy and held the strawberry in front of him. The little boy quietly looked back and found that Lin Xiao was no longer there. He then raised his head boldly and was attracted by the sweet smell of the strawberry. After Lin Xiao brought Wu Yueling out of the space, she held her hand and went downstairs. The zombies nearby didn't go far. They turned back after smelling Wu Yueling's scent. "Roar!" Lin Xiao narrowed her eyes and roared at them in a low voice. The warning in her voice was very strong. As soon as the zombies heard Lin Xiao's voice, they all subconsciously shrank back. Some of the timid ones immediately turned around and left. But there were still some who stared at Wu Yueling, as if they didn't want to give up on eating her. Lin Xiao walked down and they followed her. But they kept surrounding her and refused to leave. Lin Xiao went down to the first floor and walked out of the iron gate to the side of her parked car. She opened the door of the passenger seat and was about to carry the little one in. Suddenly, from the second floor of another building, a figure jumped down from the second floor. Then it landed on all fours like an animal and quickly jumped to Lin Xiao's side. Lin Xiao quickly turned around and shielded Wu Yueling behind her legs. Just as the figure jumped over, She waved her hand and the claws on her fingers popped out. Poof! She tightly clasped the face of the person and opened her 5 fingers. The sharp claws deeply pierced into the temples of the person's eyes. Roar! A strange roar came from the person in her hand. It was grabbed by the head by Lin Xiao and even lifted up high with its feet off the ground. But it didn't give up and waved its hands and feet randomly. It kept stretching out its claws to catch Lin Xiao, but before it finished roaring, Lin Xiao exerted force with her claws. Poof! A crisp sound was heard. The head of the zombie that had just reached level 3 was directly crushed by Lin Xiao. In fact, Lin Xiao didn't know that her grip was so strong. She was just suffocated by the stench of the zombie's mouth. She subconsciously exerted force with her palm, but she didn't expect to directly crush the zombie's head. Poof! She used her other hand and dug out the zombie core from the zombie's brain with a look of disgust. Then she swung her hand and threw the zombie's corpse far away. With this move, the ordinary zombies that were not far away from her were scared. Maybe they were frightened by the inexplicable murderous aura that was emitted when Lin Xiao crushed the zombie's head. Now they all retreated one after another and didn't dare to come forward. Lin Xiao didn't know that her whole body was emitting a murderous aura. She put the zombie core in her palm, and it instantly turned into powder and floated down from her palm. A faint warmth only circled around her body and then returned to her mind. Then there was nothing. Simply put, the energy in the zombie core was not enough to fill the gap between her teeth. After cleanly and neatly dealing with the zombie that suddenly jumped out, Lin Xiao wiped her dirty and smelly hands on the back of her clothes. Then she turned around and prepared to carry Wu Yueling, whose body had become a little stiff, into the car. She also conveniently touched her back. It seemed that this child was frightened just now. Looking at her dull expression and stiff body, it was obvious. Lin Xiao let her sit down, fastened the seatbelt, and closed the car door. Then she went to the driver's seat, opened the door, and sat in. She started the car and turned the car around. Then she left the neighborhood. Just as she was about to drive away, she suddenly saw a convenience store next to her. Therefore, she stopped again, pulled the little girl into the convenience store, and swept through the items. Then she continued on the road. Chapter 72. While Lin Xiao was driving, a military off-road vehicle arrived at the section of the road where the level 5 zombie leader was guarding. It stopped in front of the unrecognizable corpses of the robbers. Mengyu and Wu Chengyue got out of the car and looked at the 3 corpses. 2 of them were headless. Wu Chengyue frowned slightly and walked to the corpses without any expression. He observed the corpses one by one. These are all robbers. Looking at the state of the corpses, they have been dead for 3 days. The 2 heads were completely cut off. It was a clean and neat move. But this doesn't seem like something zombies would do. This one looks like it. A claw dug out the heart first. He stood in front of the fat man's corpse with one hand on his chest and the other supporting his chin. He pointed at the 2 headless corpses and the fat man's corpse. He even turned the fat man's corpse over with his foot. Wu Chengyue observed the situation as soon as he saw the corpses. Although the fat man's stomach was also dug out and his brain was bitten off, there was a big hole on his back, indicating that he was killed by the zombie's claw. Looking at the 2 headless corpses, they also saw 2 skulls that had been chewed off and thrown aside casually. They must have encountered a high-level zombie. It might have been the level 5 zombie leader. But what's going on with them being stripped of their clothes? Mengyu looked at the 3 corpses, all naked except for their underwear, and couldn't help but feel a little strange. Could it be that the zombie had a strange habit of stripping clothes? But why did the zombies strip off their clothes? He didn't see any clothes that had been taken off. Wu Chengyue also carefully observed the surrounding situation and shook his head. I don't know. Then he turned to look at Mengyu and asked, "Didn't you feel anything?" Compared to Lingling's reaction, Mengyu closed her eyes and slightly raised her right hand with her palm facing up. A blade of grass grew out of her palm. The blade of grass swayed a few times as if it was blown by the wind. Then it pointed to the other side of the road. Wu Chengyue was surprised. Did they take a detour? They didn't go straight? Mengyu nodded and said, "It should be because they couldn't go forward, so they took a detour." I remember there's a bridge up ahead. Wu Chengyue thought for a moment and said strangely, bridge? Was that female zombie afraid of water? Otherwise, why would we take a detour? Mingyu glanced at the corpses and turned back to the car. I'm not sure. Let's go after Lingling. If I'm not wrong, the female zombie should have gone around to the town next to it. Wu Chengyue nodded and immediately turned to follow her back to the car. After sitting in the car, he asked his subordinate to turn the car around and drive to the side of the road. Mingyu said strangely, this female zombie seems to be heading south. It seems to have a purpose. The two of them chased this female zombie for many days and discovered that the route she took didn't seem to change at all. He just kept walking towards the south without turning. Furthermore, the path they took was the straightest and fastest. Wu Chengyue's gentle eyes darkened slightly, and he was also thinking about Mingyu's words. He said, we don't care what its purpose is going south, but why is it taking my Lingling? Mingyu said, no matter what it's doing with Lingling, we can only find it as soon as possible. I don't know what it will do to Lingling during this period of time, and I'm afraid that Lingling's situation won't be too good. Her personality is introverted, and she has autism. I'm really afraid that something will happen to her body. After she said that, Wu Chengyue's face darkened. He had always been worried about what Mingyu was worried about. He still knew about his daughter. She didn't even let the people around him get close to her, and now she was taken away by an ugly zombie. He could imagine how scared his daughter was, and what happened to her because she couldn't bear it. There was also the problem of food. Since Mingyu could feel that the seed in Wu Yueling's body was still alive, it meant that his daughter wasn't dead. But what he was most afraid of was that his daughter had already fallen into that kind of half-dead state of unconsciousness, because he really couldn't think that the female zombie would find human food for his daughter to eat. Maybe in that space, after a living person went in, they would immediately stay unconscious. Maybe there wasn't even oxygen in there. Wu Chengyue originally suppressed these thoughts in his heart and kept comforting himself that his daughter was fine. His daughter was fine. His daughter was fine. But now that Mingyu said it, even if he usually had a good personality, he was a bit depressed. But fortunately, he was one of the leaders of a base, and his rationality was still very strong. So he quickly suppressed the negative thoughts in his heart. At least, his daughter was still alive. That was enough. Seeing that his face wasn't very good, Mingyu also knew that she said something wrong. She quickly changed her words, but it's okay. My Xiao Chao can feel that Lingling is very close to us. We should be able to catch up with it soon. At this time, the soldier who was driving suddenly stopped the car. He turned around and reported to him. Reporting to leader, there seems to be something up ahead. Wu Chengyue and the soldier looked at the front of the car at the same time and asked, what's the situation? The soldier pointed to the road and said, there are new car tracks on the road. When Wu Chengyue and the soldier heard this, they immediately opened the door and got out of the car. Their car had already gotten off the highway and was heading to the small town on a side road. Now that they heard the soldier say that there were new car tracks on the road, Wu Chengyue and the soldier felt strange and went down to take a look. Sure enough, on the road that was originally covered with a lot of dust, there were 2 car tracks on it. And looking at the tracks, the car hadn't been driving for a long time. There is a car driving into this town. Could it be a zombie hunting team went in? Or robbers? Mingyu stared at the car tracks on the ground and said strangely, we'll know the situation when we get there. Let's go. Wu Chengyue calmly looked at the road in front of him, turned around and returned to the car. Mingyu also followed him in the car. The car tracks they saw were left by Lin Xiao when he drove past. Because this town basically no one came after the apocalypse, there was a lot of sand on the road. Wu Chengyue and the soldier didn't think that the driver was a strange zombie like Lin Xiao. In their minds, only humans could drive. But among the humans, there was still the zombie hunting team and the robbers that appeared after the apocalypse. In any case, it couldn't be the army from the base, because they only saw one car passing by. With this new discovery in mind, their car continued to drive in the direction of the town. Chapter 73. Lin Xiao was about to drive out, but she was suddenly attracted by a farm after driving for a short while. Maybe it was because the location of this town was rather remote. No one had come here since the apocalypse, except for the local people who had all turned into zombies. Coupled with the fact that everyone was fleeing for their lives after the apocalypse, everyone was running away. Therefore, this place became empty. Lin Xiao had picked up a lot of useful things in the convenience store. The road that she was driving on was a detour from the back of the town. But she didn't expect to pass by a farm. No, it should be said that she didn't expect to see a farm here. And it didn't look small. Lin Xiao stopped the car by the roadside and stretched her head to look at the large green crops outside the window. But in her eyes, there was only the grayness of the whole world. There were many abandoned sheds below. But because they had been abandoned for so long, most of the plastic sheets on the top had been blown away, leaving only the bare shelves there. But under these shelves, there were a lot of vegetables. Although they didn't grow neatly, one was empty while the other was long. Furthermore, each shed was used to grow one type of vegetable, and there were about 2 mu of land under the shed that was used to grow vegetables. Lin Xiao looked around and saw all kinds of vegetables, beans, potatoes, peanuts, melons, and so on. Unfortunately, it looked like 90% of them had become mutated vegetables. She couldn't see the color clearly, but she could feel the virus in these plants. She didn't know if it was because her body had been in the lake or something else. Now, she could not only see the energy in her lake, but she could also sense many different things with her sensitivity. Lin Xiao got out of the car and put Tiny Tot into the space. She entered the space again and brought Junjun out of the mini space. She made a rule for Junjun, which was when Tiny Tot was inside. She had to come out if she wanted to go in. Lin Xiao would let Tiny Tot out. Junjun trusted Lin Xiao a little more now, so she was a little relieved to put the little boy in the space. So she followed Lin Xiao to go out. As soon as she came out, she saw them standing by the roadside, and next to them was a farm. In her eyes, it was still grayish-white, without any color. She looked at Lin Xiao in confusion, and then Lin Xiao gave her a piece of paper. "Stay here. I'll go down and take a look. You have to be careful here. If any humans come over, you have to avoid them. Or find me." Then, Lin Xiao directly jumped from the roadside to the vegetable field below. No one had taken care of this vegetable field for a long time. In fact, there was more grass growing than vegetables. It looked very messy. However, Lin Xiao's eyes were sharp. Originally, when she passed by this place, the first thing she saw was the orchard on the other side of the hill. Only when he stopped did he realize that there was a vegetable field below. Why would Lin Xiao be attracted by these fruits and vegetables? That was because she suddenly wanted to see if there were any mutated or edible fruits and vegetables. She now had 2 living people in her space, not one. He couldn't just let them eat strawberries, right? Most importantly, Lin Xiao smelled food in the orchard. She could eat it. In other words, there were animals inside. Therefore, other than the rat and rabbit that she ate last time, she had not eaten for a long time. Although she didn't eat, it didn't affect her much. However, now that she was by Xiao Buddy inside every day, she always felt her teeth itch, her throat was uncomfortable, and her stomach felt weird. She wanted to eat meat. After going down the vegetable field, Lin Xiao looked at the messy vegetables and grass under her feet. After walking for a while, she saw that the ground was full of creeping melon vines, but many of them carried viruses. She squatted down and looked at the melons that had borne fruits. In her eyes, they were all grayish-white. She turned her head to look at the leaves and vines. The leaves were also grayish-white. Only the vines were dark black with a strange purple color. Lin Xiao knew that this strange purple color was the virus. She couldn't see it before, but now she could. Apart from the green energy of the lake, she also saw another color. But in the eyes of ordinary people, they couldn't see it. But what she found strange was the pumpkins in front of her. There was no virus on the leaves, and there was no virus on the melons. All the viruses were gathered on the vines. What was going on? Looking at this strange pumpkin, Lin Xiao used her claws to scratch the skin of the big pumpkin in front of her. This pumpkin was no different from a normal pumpkin before the end of the world. The only difference was the pattern on its skin. It was very twisted. She touched the surface of the pumpkin with both hands. She was sure that this pumpkin didn't have a virus, but the pattern looked a little strange, because it looked a bit like a twisted human face. This kind of pattern, any ordinary person wouldn't dare to touch it, because it was common sense after the end of the world not to touch these strange plants. Unless you want to be infected with these zombie viruses, you'd better not touch them. Lin Xiao also felt that the plants after the end of the world were strange. They looked very abnormal, like a mutation. On the contrary, they were not poisonous. Just like the strawberry before. The pumpkin in front of her had indeed mutated, but its poison was not in the fruit, but in the vine. If one didn't touch its vine, ordinary people wouldn't be infected by the virus. There were some plants that looked normal, but they were not normal either. Lin Xiao looked at the cheddar, which was a hairy melon. It looked quite normal. Although Lin Xiao couldn't see its color, at least its appearance was normal. However, Lin Xiao could sense a fishy smell coming from the fruits of the melons. She didn't know what effect this fishy smell would have on people, but she could see that this fishy smell was emitted from the virus in the melon. After looking at these melons for a few times, Lin Xiao stood up. She lifted her feet and walked gently to the orchard. After filling her stomach first, she would slowly study these vegetables and fruits. There were two kinds of fruit trees in the orchard. One was a peach and the other was a pear. Although the area was very large, many of the peach and pear trees had mutated. They were infected with a lot of viruses. Lin Xiao sniffed the scent of the trees, although the smell was not good. She didn't feel disgusted. Maybe it was because she also had a virus in her body. In addition to the smell of these plants, there were other smells coming from the depths of the forest. It was sweet and fragrant, which made Lin Xiao's hunger even stronger. She followed the smell and walked gently. Maybe she had unconsciously entered the state of hunting. Lin Xiao's breath was instinctively restrained. Not to mention the sound of her footsteps, she didn't even feel the vibration of the ground. Like a cat, she walked gently to the smell that attracted her. Chapter 74. Just as Lin Xiao was getting closer and closer to the source of the smell, suddenly, a strange smell came from the side, with a strong fishy smell. Then Lin Xiao turned her head to have a look. When she turned back, she found that the fragrance she was about to get close to had suddenly disappeared. She narrowed her eyes and stopped in her tracks, because she felt that something had locked onto her. Lin Xiao didn't know if it was the fishy smell that scared away her prey, or if the sweet smell from before was fake. It was a bait to lure her in. She stood still and silently sensed the movements around her. The place where Lin Xiao was standing was already deep in the pear garden, surrounded by pear trees. They were very lush, and there was grass on the ground. It was noon, and the wind was blowing. There was a rustling sound of leaves. There was a faint vibration coming from her feet, although it was very small. A normal person couldn't feel it. But Lin Xiao was no longer a normal person. She didn't look back, calmly looking in front. She even looked to the left and right casually. It seemed that she was looking for something in front of her in confusion, but her attention was actually behind her. The slight vibration was getting closer and closer to her, and it felt a little strange. It was not a series of tremors, but more like a continuous grinding sound. It was like a very long rope on the ground, and a person stood at one end, lifting the rope and dragging it. Coupled with the fishy smell, Lin Xiao felt that she had guessed something. Just as the vibrations from the friction stopped, Lin Xiao turned around abruptly. 10 claws had popped out, flashing with a sharp light and fiercely waved behind her. At the same time, after turning her body, she quickly leaped backward. Obviously, Lin Xiao's attack was correct. When she turned around and retreated, the place where she waved her claws was on a pear tree, and there was a huge snake as thick as a thigh hanging on it. The snake was very big, thicker than an adult's thigh. It wrapped around the pear tree, almost wrapping the whole pear tree. Fortunately, after the pear tree mutated, it grew very tall. Unlike a normal honey pear tree, it was neither tall nor short, so it was able to support the huge snake. Hiss! The snake's head, which was already more than a meter long, was too late to dodge Lin Xiao's sudden attack. Lin Xiao's sharp claws left 3 cuts on it. But this snake's skin was very hard. Lin Xiao's sharp claws, which could easily cut off trees and human heads, cut the snake's head. However, it only caused moderate damage to it. The giant snake whose head had been clawed immediately screamed in pain. His body, which was wrapped around the pear tree, twitched violently. Holy shit! What did this snake eat to grow so big? Lin Xiao couldn't even tell how long the snake was because it had wrapped itself around the tree many times. But there was still a tail hanging down to the ground. She couldn't tell what kind of snake it was because it was completely black. It looked like a cobra, but it was rare to see a cobra in this city. Most of them were venomous snakes or serpents. But what kind of snake was this pitch-black snake in front of her with a metallic luster on its scales? No matter what kind of snake it was angry at this moment. One of the eyes on the black snake's head was scratched by Lin Xiao's claws, and bright red blood flowed out. But it didn't hurt its eyes. At this moment, its eyes were flashing with cold anger, and it was staring at Lin Xiao. It was the king of this forest because of its size, strength, speed, and hard skin. Other animals couldn't hurt it, but now, it was scratched by the prey in front of it, and it was in great pain. So it was angry. When Lin Xiao smelled the blood that flowed out, he suddenly froze. She stretched her nose, and after smelling it carefully, she suddenly felt happy. So fragrant. Just now, she only smelled a strong fishy smell. Now that she smelled this blood, Lin Xiao really wanted to drink this snake's blood. She looked at this especially long snake, and the corner of her mouth suddenly curved up happily. Looking at the snake's eyes, it was like looking at a table full of delicious food. It was like other zombies looking at a living person, and the feeling of saliva flowing out. Suddenly being stared at by its prey like it was food, the huge snake became even more angry. Its body twisted and tightened on the pear tree, and its head was raised high. It looked down at Lin Xiao angrily and opened its mouth wide, sticking out its tongue. Two sharp and long fangs were also revealed. Then, it suddenly rushed down from the tree and flew towards Lin Xiao, who was 4 or 5 meters away. Its body nimbly slid down from the tree, and the snake opened its mouth wide to bite Lin Xiao's head. Although this snake was huge, its speed was really fast. In the blink of an eye, it jumped from the tree to Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao felt her eyes blur, and before she could see the situation clearly, she felt a gust of fishy wind blowing towards her. She instinctively dodged to the side and very nimbly turned to the side. At the same time, she used her claws to scratch the snake's head with great force. Slash! An ear-piercing sound rang out. Then, she felt a numbness in her claws, as if her claws had scratched on some kind of aluminum alloy. Hiss! The huge snake hissed in pain again, and it was obvious that it was hit harder than before. Lin Xiao quickly retreated, and when she fixed her eyes on the huge snake again, she saw that the snake was now on the ground, twisting violently into a ball. Looking closely, she actually scratched one side of its head, and the position was exactly the same as before. Looking at the huge snake crazily twisting on the ground, Lin Xiao silently took a step back, not for anything else, but because she didn't want to be swept by the snake's tail. Because, when the huge snake crazily twisted, it actually broke a few trees next to it, and the grass was also slapped by it. It seemed to be very painful. Lin Xiao silently said sorry in her heart. Then, she felt that she was stupid. Sorry my ass. At this time, the movement of the huge snake slowly became smaller. His body, which looked to be about 10 meters long, slowly shrank into circles. Then, its head was at the top, but it didn't dare to raise it high. Hiding in its body, only 2 cold and fierce eyes could be seen. It stared at Lin Xiao angrily and cautiously. Seeing the strong killing intent and vigilance in its eyes, Lin Xiao knew that the snake wanted to bite her. Maybe it didn't expect that her reaction was so fast and that she could hurt its head. So, it didn't dare to be careless anymore. Flicking her claws, which were still numb, Lin Xiao moved her fingers. She didn't expect the snake's head to be so hard. She heard the sound of her nails colliding with the snake's head. Just now, she heard the sound of her nails colliding with the snake's head. Chapter 75. While Lin Xiao and the giant snake were fighting, Jun, who was waiting on the side of the road, suddenly heard something. She turned her head and looked at the other side of the road. She could hear the faint sound of a car. She didn't forget that she had become a zombie, so she had to be vigilant against humans. Junjun immediately went down from the side of the car to the vegetable field, then ran in the direction Lin Xiao had gone. She wasn't running very smoothly. She stumbled and her legs weren't very agile. But she could still run. It was just that she wasn't that fast. After a few minutes, a military off-road vehicle appeared at the end of the road and quickly came to the side of Lin Xiao's car. The car stopped next to Lin Xiao's car. Wu Chengyue, Meng Yu and the soldier who was driving got out of the car. The three of them circled around Lin Xiao's car and observed it for a while before looking at the farm next to it. It turns out that there is a farm and an orchard here. Has no one been here before? Meng Yu looked at the messy crops in surprise. As she spoke, she took out the grass in her hand. She stretched her hand in the direction of the crops and closed her eyes to feel something. Wu Chengyue looked at Lin Xiao's car and looked at the vegetable field and the orchard on the hillside in the distance. He didn't say anything. The soldier next to him stared at the direction of the orchard and said, "The people in the car stopped here. Are they looking for food in this farm? But this place is infected with a virus and can't be eaten at all. Moreover, the orchard was too dangerous, so they were quite daring. Aren't they afraid that they won't be able to come out after going in?" Wu Chengyue also stared at the orchard and said, "There are things fighting inside. It should be mutant beasts." Speaking of mutant beasts, the three of them became serious. Meng Yu nodded and said, "I can feel it. It's a level 4 mutant beast. It's very dangerous, but it's not your opponent. And this place is close to the mountains, so it's normal to have mutant beasts." They were now at the edge of the city. Not far away, they would be out of the city and then enter the territory of Zhe province. So this area was full of mountains, and the small town they just passed was also near the mountains. Wu Chengyue nodded. Mutant beasts were not the only dangerous things in the forest. The most dangerous ones were the mutated plants that appeared out of nowhere. Meng Yu looked at the leaf on her palm and said, "All the plants here have been infected, and there's basically nothing edible. If the people in the car entered the orchard, they probably wouldn't be able to find anything edible. Apart from mutated beasts, there are also high-level zombies." She frowned. She had a premonition of danger coming from the orchard, which made her feel uneasy. Meng Yu knew that this was the feeling that the mutated plants and animals gave her. Although she was a plant-type ability user, she did not have much attack power. That was because her ability only allowed her to be particularly sensitive to the plants around her. She also had another skill, which was hasten, but she was an expert in tracking. Fortunately, she had some combat power and was sensitive to her surroundings. Therefore, she was not weak. Otherwise, he wouldn't have followed Wu Chengyue and the others on missions. At this time, Meng Yu suddenly stared at her own grass. Then, her expression turned solemn. She raised her eyes and stared in the direction of the orchard that she felt was very dangerous. She was carefully sensing something. Wu Chengyue noticed her reaction, and his attention was also attracted to her face. "What's wrong? What's the situation inside?" Originally, Wu Chengyue didn't intend to enter the orchard, because it was too dangerous. Moreover, he was in a hurry to chase after his daughter, so he didn't want to waste time here. However, with the appearance of this car, his rationality forced him to stop. If the people in the car hadn't been in the orchard for a long time, maybe they would have run out in a panic. Otherwise, the two in the battle aura inside would not have been so focused on fighting. They should have gone to catch their prey first. Meng Yu opened her eyes and said with a somewhat serious expression, "I sense that Lingling is in the orchard. If I guessed correctly, that strange female zombie should be over there." Saying that, she raised her hand and pointed in the direction of Lin Xiao. Listening to her words, Wu Chengyue's face slightly changed. He stared in that direction with a blank expression and asked, "Are you sure?" Meng Yu nodded affirmatively and said, "My senses can't be wrong. Let's go in and take a look first. I think the one who fought with the mutant beast should be more powerful. I feel that the one fighting with the mutant beast might be it." Wu Chengyue didn't wait for her to finish speaking, and his figure flashed past her. In the blink of an eye, he passed through the vegetable field and entered the orchard. "Xiao Cheng, you wait here." Meng Yu quickly gave the order to the soldier and nimbly jumped from the roadside to the vegetable field. She followed Wu Chengyue into the orchard. "Sister Yu, be careful." The soldier was Xiao Liqing. The soldier was Xiao Liqing, and he was a little worried as he shouted at Meng Yu's back. Although their leader was very strong, Meng Yu's combat ability wasn't too high. It was still too dangerous to run into the orchard now. Fortunately, she was a plant type. Although she couldn't attack, she was still able to attack. Although she couldn't attack, the mutant plants wouldn't take the initiative to attack her. On the other side, Lin Xiao looked at the giant snake that had coiled up into a huge pile of poop. No, it was like an iron tower. This was its attacking and defending posture. It could both defend and suddenly jump out to attack its prey. Lin Xiao was standing 5 meters away from it, his legs crossed in front of him and behind him. Her knees were slightly bent, and her claws were raised in front of her body. It looked like she was about to attack. She watched the snake recover so quickly after being in pain for a while. She had to concentrate all her energy to deal with the snake. The giant snake buried its head in its body for a while, then slowly raised its head. It stared coldly at Lin Xiao, and the wounds on its head even stopped bleeding. Lin Xiao sniffed the smell of blood, which was mixed with a fishy smell, but apart from the fishy smell, there was a thick sweetness to it. However, there was a thick sweetness to it, which made her hunger grow stronger and stronger. Seeing the snake slowly raise its head, Lin Xiao's eyes darkened. Her pitch-black eyes stared at the triangular head that was the size of a baby's head. The ferocious giant snake swaggered towards Lin Xiao, its body instantly dispersing into the shape of an iron tower. Very quickly, it rushed towards her with a gust of fishy wind. Lin Xiao immediately crouched down, but didn't retreat. Instead, she rushed towards the giant snake in a straight line. A snake couldn't crawl in a straight line, so it could only quickly slither left and right. So if it chased its prey in a straight line, its chances of escaping would be higher. Chapter 76. Moreover, when the snake saw Lin Xiao pouncing towards it, it immediately felt that it was being provoked. After being stunned for a moment, its diamond-shaped eyes flashed fiercely. Suddenly, it turned to the side and quickly made a big turn. Just as the snake's head turned back, Lin Xiao's figure rushed in front of it. Lin Xiao originally wanted to attack the giant snake's head, but she didn't expect that the snake's intelligence was quite high. Relying on its fast crawling speed, it actually made a turn from the side, and the snake's mouth was directly behind her. In a moment of desperation, she could only wave her claws on its thick body. Then, she immediately jumped away. Clang! The sound of metal colliding was heard again. Lin Xiao's claws were very sharp and hard, but the snake's skin was thicker and harder than the skin on its head. Lin Xiao's attack only left a few white marks on its body, and didn't even break its skin. On the contrary, it caused her hand to tremble until it became numb. Damn it! Why is it so hard? How can I fight it? Seeing that the snake's attack didn't work, Lin Xiao couldn't help but curse in her heart. Now, she could only attack its head. But after being hit twice, the snake had learned to be smart. It knew to protect its head, avoid the head, and use its body as a weapon. Sure enough, the snake saw that its body didn't seem to be injured after being hit by Lin Xiao. Seeing that Lin Xiao was retreating, it immediately chased after Lin Xiao fiercely. Right now, it wanted to use its body to wrap around Lin Xiao and then fiercely strangle her. Just as Lin Xiao was retreating, she felt a cold sense of danger on her back. She immediately moved her mind and disappeared into thin air. Hiss! Suddenly, the giant snake fell to the ground and froze in confusion. Then, it quickly raised its head and circled around the place where Lin Xiao disappeared. The snake's head looked up and down, left and right. Its head turned a few times, but it didn't see any trace of its prey. If it hadn't seen Lin Xiao disappear in front of its eyes, it would have thought that its eyes were playing tricks on it. Just as the giant snake was looking everywhere, looking for Lin Xiao, a transparent figure flashed out again, but the giant snake didn't feel her breath, nor did it see her. It was as if he was blind, turning a blind eye to the transparent Lin Xiao. In fact, this snake didn't eat zombies, but it appeared here. It was only because it had tracked a small mountain dog here before, and this mountain dog was also a mutated one. It had changed from a normal mountain dog to a mountain dog that liked to live in the mountains. The giant snake, which had been starving for a few days, had been following the mountain dog ever since it encountered it. He was looking for an opportunity to devour it, but when he chased it to this orchard today, it was too late. Suddenly a zombie ran out from the side. However, the smell of this zombie was somewhat different. It made the giant snake feel very comfortable, and it could also be eaten. Therefore, it immediately abandoned the small mountain dog and turned its head to stare at Lin Xiao. Unexpectedly, Lin Xiao was a tough nut to crack. Not only had he been scratched by Lin Xiao, but he had also suddenly disappeared before its eyes. This made the giant snake, who was unable to eat the meat and had been clawed twice, extremely angry. However, just as it was holding its breath, a transparent figure had already quietly appeared behind its head. Lin Xiao silently stood behind the giant snake. At this time, she could not feel her steps. The giant snake, which relied on the ground to sense, actually did not feel her approach. She stood there and then quickly entered the space. Then, she immediately opened her eyes and appeared out of the space. As soon as she appeared, the two claws in her hands had already forcefully clawed at the giant snake's head. Hiss! When the giant snake suddenly felt Lin Xiao's breath appear behind its head, it did not react for a moment. There was a sharp pain in its head. However, when it turned its head, it did not see anything. However, the sharp pain in its head was still there. After Lin Xiao swung her claws twice, she immediately flashed into the space. Therefore, when the giant snake turned its head to look at the situation in pain, it did not see her. When the giant snake turned its head to look, it did not see Lin Xiao. It rolled on the ground in pain, and the wound on its head was a little bigger. That's right, Lin Xiao continued to claw at the wound that she had just made. Now that she knew how to use the space invisibility skill, she happily aimed at the head of the snake and started to slash. Thus, the current scene was that of a giant snake twisting its body crazily in this orchard, rolling everywhere. The surrounding grass, trees, and stones were all swept away, and a cloud of dust rose up. Sand and stones were flying everywhere, and that head was dripping with blood. A transparent shadow flashed from time to time, and sharp claws quickly, ruthlessly, and accurately slashed at the snake's head. After a few minutes, the giant snake's movements slowly calmed down. In fact, it was already on the verge of death, lying there weakly and not moving. Its body twisted until its stomach turned out, but there was no way to care. The flesh and blood on its head were badly mutilated, and both of its eyes were scratched blind. A large amount of blood flowed out, staining the ground, grass, trees, stones, and soil that it had turned over with a large amount of blood. Lin Xiao hid himself and observed the giant snake. He could feel that its aura was rapidly weakening. She knew that it was about to die. She did not flash out, but just stood by the side and observed. Until the snake's breath completely disappeared. She then appeared from the space. Lin Xiao used her feet to kick the snake's head, and it was limp and did not respond. She then squatted down, using her claws to wipe her clothes, and then put the clean nails on the blood on the snake's head. After dipping a little, she raised her hand and put it in her mouth. A sweet and salty taste spread in her mouth, with a faint fishy taste. Lin Xiao smacked her lips, feeling that the taste was not bad. Although it was not very tasty, but compared to the juice of those fruits, this was already so good that she could fly. After tasting a little, Lin Xiao immediately wanted to take out a bucket. Then, when she was about to bleed the giant snake that had just died, her movements suddenly stopped. Then, she slowly turned around, staring coldly at the back. She saw two figures standing not far away, looking at her curiously. Seeing these two people, Lin Xiao wanted to curse. Shit, did this man have a dog's nose? He actually chased her here. If the level 5 zombie chased her because of her scent, then how did this man chase her? How did he track her? Moreover, they did not appear earlier or later. Now, when she had just finished cleaning up her prey, they appeared. This was too coincidental. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao suddenly moved her hand, and the entire giant snake that was more than 10 meters long suddenly disappeared. Then, she stood up and looked at the two people in front of her expressionlessly. And Wu Chengyue and Meng Yu also looked at her quietly, as if they did not intend to immediately make a move. Chapter 77. In fact, Wu Chengyue and Meng Yu had just arrived and saw the familiar female zombie dip her claws in the snake blood and put it in her mouth. This scene was not very beautiful, and it was a bit weird. The two of them quietly looked at the zombie, and the zombie quickly found them. Although the two of them suppressed their auras very, very low. Wu Chengyue suppressed his aura because he was strong. Psychics or zombies who are weaker than him will not be able to sense his existence. But Meng Yu's method was a bit strange. She merged her aura with the surrounding grass, vines, and trees. It was as if she hid herself in the aura of these plants. So it was also very difficult for others to find her. Even if it was a level 6 psychic or a zombie. When Lin Xiao saw the two of them, she immediately put up her guard. Especially when she stared at Wu Chengyue's eyes, there was fear and hatred, but most of it was vigilance. She was afraid that this man would suddenly strike 2 lightning bolts and directly hit her. Even if Lin Xiao's eyes were pitch black, Wu Chengyue could feel that under Lin Xiao's calm expression, there was an emotion that could not wait to bite him. Meng Yu looked back and forth at the person and the zombie, and saw that Lin Xiao only seemed to be vigilant towards them. She did not show a very aggressive state like other high-level zombies when they saw them, and began to curiously observe Lin Xiao. Last time, she did not see it clearly, and this female zombie disappeared. Looking at it now, it was really ugly. The clothes on its body had even changed, and it was a training outfit for the wild. Look at the model, and it was a man's clothes. A messy head, as if it had been burned, covered the face, and the face could be faintly seen under the hair. There was also a large scar on the face. Looking at Lin Xiao's hair, Meng Yu thought of the last time Wu Chengyue split it. She wanted to laugh in her heart. Looking at their expressions, it was as if they couldn't wait to hack their leader to vent their anger. And seeing that Lin Xiao made the ridiculously huge snake disappear in the blink of an eye, Meng Yu and Wu Chengyue were both sure that Lin Xiao was a zombie with space ability. And looking at the size of the snake, Meng Yu also knew that this snake did not look simple. Looking at the marks around it, she also knew how strong this snake was. However, this space zombie didn't seem to have any scars on its body. Not to mention the scars, even his clothes were intact. He didn't seem to be attacked at all. Lin Xiao's side did not make a sound, and neither did Wu Chengyue's side. Thus, 2 people and a corpse stared at each other with a distance of 7 to 8 meters between them. In fact, it was very easy for Lin Xiao to leave. After all, it would only take her a moment to enter the space. No matter how fast the other party was, he couldn't be faster than her. However, when Lin Xiao thought of Tiny Tot, he also thought of Junjun and her son. Since Xiao Budian's parents had come looking for him, it didn't matter if they returned it to him. No matter what, he was still someone else's child. Although she had previously said that she had abducted him so far away in a moment of anger, it was still her child. That was because she was too lazy to return it to him, and it would be a waste of her time and energy. Besides, her anger had almost dissipated. Anyway, she had taken a detour so far. But she couldn't let herself be struck by lightning for nothing. She had originally wanted to send his child back. Not only did this person not appreciate her kindness, he even struck her. I must make him apologize to me. And Wu Chengyue stared at this zombie for a while, and also felt that it was very amazing. This female zombie actually knew how to change clothes? What happened to her ugly and dirty tattered dress from last time? Since when did the zombies who never cared about their appearance learn to care about their appearance? And it seemed that this female zombie was still holding a grudge against him for accidentally striking her with lightning last time. Wu Chengyue was a more patient person, and he was curiously observing Lin Xiao. And Meng Yu felt that this zombie Lin Xiao was very interesting, and she was also silently observing her. But Lin Xiao wasn't a patient person. Oh no, a zombie. She had been waiting for these 2 people to speak, but in the end, they didn't speak for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. What the hell were these 2 people standing there staring at her without saying a word or doing anything? What was the meaning of this? Lin Xiao couldn't sense their thoughts, so in her heart, she felt that their current situation was a bit strange. The impatient zombie suddenly turned her hand, and a book and a pen appeared in her hands. Then, under the eyes of the 2 people opposite her, they widened their eyes in disbelief. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Wu Chengyue and Meng Yu looked at her holding a pen and writing like a normal person, and their faces were dumbfounded. Someone tell them, were their eyes playing tricks on them? He subconsciously used the corner of his eyes to glance at Meng Yu, who was beside him. Meng Yu felt his gaze, and also glanced at him. Both of their eyes were filled with disbelief. The zombie was writing. The zombie opposite them could actually write. When did zombies' IQ reach such a high level? They could even write words? Just as the two of them quietly exchanged glances, Lin Xiao finished writing. She tore off the paper and put away the book and pen. Then, she stared at the two people, and her body slowly squatted down. She picked up a small stone by her feet and then wrapped it in a paper. Then, she kneaded the paper and made a paper ball. She stood up and threw it at the two people, especially at Wu Chengyue's face. He caught the paper ball that was thrown at his face. Wu Chengyue, Meng Yu, who was watching from the side, hurry up and open it. At this time, Meng Yu already knew that this female zombie was different. Although she looked very strange, she really didn't want to kill them. Now, she was actually holding a pen to write. It was so simple that it was unbelievable. In fact, she really wanted to know what Lin Xiao was writing on the paper. But when she saw Wu Chengyue catch the paper ball, she was stunned. Unable to suppress her curiosity, Meng Yu couldn't help but urge him. Only then did Wu Chengyue quietly open the paper and threw the stone to the side. Meng Yu stretched her head over and saw a paragraph written in sharp handwriting on the paper. Does it feel good when you attack others? Apologize. Otherwise, don't even think about seeing Tiny. If I don't let you see me, it's useless even if you bite me. Apologize. Wu Chengyue. Meng Yu couldn't help but laugh when she saw the first sentence. What a huge grievance. Wu Chengyue was silent. He couldn't react. Not only did he find a zombie that could understand human nature, he even accidentally attacked it. Now, it actually wanted him to apologize. What the hell? A zombie that could write. A zombie that could ask others to apologize. And threaten him. When did zombies nowadays start to understand human nature? It is threatening you. But the handwriting is quite nice. Meng Yu said with a smile. Wu Chengyue looked at the words in his hand, and then looked at the zombie opposite him, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. Do you think it can understand our words? After he said this, Meng Yu and Lin Xiao rolled their eyes at the same time. Of course, there was a difference in how they rolled their eyes. For example, Meng Yu rolled her eyes normally, while Lin Xiao directly looked up at the sky. The despised Wu Chengyue. Chapter 78. Wu Chengyue didn't know what he was feeling at this moment, being looked down upon by a zombie that seemed to have a high IQ. Although he couldn't see the other party's eye roll, the expression was very obvious. Then he realized that his question was a bit stupid under the disdain of the two people next to him. She could even write. So how could she not understand what you were saying? It's not like it was deaf. How on earth did this zombie mutate? Other than the fact that it couldn't speak and that appearance, why did it feel like a human? You? Can you let us see Lingling? Meng Yu suddenly looked at Lin Xiao and asked. Her tone was still very polite. She realized that the man next to her was already scared by this zombie and didn't know what he was here for. Hearing Meng Yu's words, Wu Chengyue came back to his senses. He suddenly remembered that he was in a daze and was scared by this zombie. Hearing Meng Yu mention business, he quickly returned to his senses and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao heard this and nodded, but after taking a look at Meng Yu, she looked at Wu Chengyue. But he didn't see any movement from her. The two people opposite immediately knew what she meant. This person hasn't apologized yet, so he won't let her see. If he wanted to see, sure. Apologize first. Lin Xiao glared at Wu Chengyue with a face full of resentment. Thinking about it, she wanted to be kind and send Tiny Tot back in the end, this good person. Oh, good zombie wasn't even made. Instead, he was attacked for no reason. Anyone would feel aggrieved. Wu Chengyue thought about how he was quick to hit him last time. Although it wasn't fatal, it was probably enough to make this zombie suffer. No wonder she had a face full of resentment. Thinking about it, if he was attacked like this, it would also be very painful. Thoughts flashed in his mind. Wu Chengyue realized that he really should apologize. After all, This zombie didn't do anything at that time, although it was a zombie. But to let him apologize to a zombie? This feeling was too strange. In their minds, zombies are existences that must be destroyed by them. They were like wild beasts. They originally couldn't have human nature. The current situation was like you accidentally hurt an animal, and then the animal came back to you to apologize. Isn't this feeling weird? But here came the problem. He was in the wrong. If he didn't apologize, she wouldn't let him see his daughter. So do you want to apologize? Mengyu looked at Wu Chengyue strangely and saw his conflicted expression. She couldn't help but sneak a smile at the side. Just apologize. Who told you to hit him? Maybe she still wanted to send Ling Ling back to you one day, but you beat her away. As she spoke, she couldn't help but glance at Lin Xiao. Then, Lin Xiao nodded. Mengyu, no way. She was just saying it for fun. Could it be that this zombie was really sending people back that day? Lin Xiao crossed his arms and looked at Wu Chengyue quietly. Wu Chengyue felt an inexplicable sense of guilt under her gaze. He coughed unnaturally, then looked at Lin Xiao and said, "Cough. Sorry. That day, it was a mistake. So, I'm sorry." As he spoke, he looked at Lin Xiao sincerely and apologetically. He thought that even if he said that, the female zombie would not forgive him so quickly, because sometimes a woman's heart was really lacking. But he didn't expect that as soon as he finished speaking, the female zombie in front of him nodded without hesitation. That's it? He turned his head and looked at Mengyu, wanting to confirm with her. Mengyu smiled and nodded at him. Wu Chengyue then turned his head to look at Lin Xiao. He saw her give him a look that said, "That's more like it," then disappeared in a flash. No, the corpse disappeared. He didn't know why he could understand her eyes. A zombie's expression was too human-like. Wu Chengyue felt that he still couldn't accept it. In less than 2 seconds, 2 figures flashed again. They appeared out of thin air at the place where she disappeared. As soon as they saw the small figure next to the female zombie, Wu Chengyue and Mengyu couldn't help but call out, "Ling Ling." When they looked at their daughter again, they found that she was in good spirits and her face was clean. She was still wearing the clothes she was wearing before she disappeared, but it didn't look dirty. Seeing that his daughter was well taken care of, Wu Chengyue had been worried about her for the past few days. At this time, he finally put it down. Wu Yueling was a little confused when she was brought out by Lin Xiao, but her expression was always calm. But when she turned her head and saw Wu Chengyue standing opposite of her, her eyes suddenly lit up. Then she slightly blushed. "Dad." Seeing the familiar look in his daughter's eyes, Wu Chengyue's heart softened. He couldn't help but take 2 steps forward and suddenly stopped. He looked at Lin Xiao with some hesitation. At this time, Lin Xiao just crossed her arms and looked at the interaction between the father and daughter with a leisurely look. Seeing Wu Chengyue suddenly look at her, she didn't say anything. But Wu Yueling reacted. She saw Wu Chengyue looking at Lin Xiao. She suddenly ran in front of Lin Xiao and then shook her head at Wu Chengyue. Although she didn't say anything, Wu Chengyue and Mengyu on the opposite side could guess what she meant. Wu Yueling was afraid that Wu Chengyue would attack Lin Xiao because she also knew that Lin Xiao was a zombie. She often saw Wu Chengyue fighting zombies. Although she was still young and didn't like to talk, but she was very sensitive and also very smart. Lin Xiao stood behind Wu Yueling and felt the protective awareness in her heart. Looking at her small body, her heart couldn't help but feel warm. She stretched out her claws and gently touched Wu Yueling's head. Then she pushed her towards Wu Chengyue. Wu Yueling looked back at her and obviously understood what Lin Xiao meant. She was still holding the gray rabbit in her arms and then glanced at Lin Xiao. She turned her head and walked towards Wu Chengyue. But after taking 2 steps, she turned back to look at Lin Xiao. Then she suddenly stopped. "Ling Ling, come over to Dad." Wu Chengyue squatted down and looked at Wu Yueling at eye level and gently waved at her. Hearing her dad's call, Wu Yueling immediately walked towards him. But when she was halfway there, the rabbit in her arms suddenly jumped out of her arms and onto the ground. Wu Yueling was shocked. She thought that the rabbit that played with her so well was going to run away. But when she looked, she saw the rabbit running towards Lin Xiao. She was stunned and wanted to turn around to chase after the rabbit. "Ling Ling, come over." Seeing that Wu Yueling wanted to turn around and go back to the female zombie, Mengyu also shouted. At this time, Wu Chengyue's figure flashed and instantly appeared beside Wu Yueling. Then he carried her. Chapter 79. Good girl. Daddy will catch you another one when we get back. After Wu Chengyue picked up his daughter, he glanced at the little rabbit that had already jumped to Lin Xiao's feet. He coaxed his daughter. However, Wu Yueling shook her head and continued to stare at the little rabbit. Although she didn't cry or throw a tantrum, the stubborn look in her eyes couldn't be ignored. Wu Chengyue also knew his daughter's personality. Once she liked something, she wouldn't let it go. There was nothing else that could replace it. But what could he do? The rabbit belonged to someone else. Was he supposed to ask the female zombie for a rabbit? Moreover, zombies that keep rabbits as pets are so strange. Don't tell me you're raising them as food. He didn't know that he had guessed Lin Xiao's thoughts. That's right. When Lin Xiao threw the rabbit into the space, he wanted to use it as food. Lin Xiao was curious as to why the rabbit didn't run away and instead ran to his feet. Seeing Wu Chengyue suddenly appear beside Wu Yueling, he just glanced at him indifferently. Seeing that Wu Yueling had returned to Wu Chengyue's hands, Lin Xiao took out his notebook to write. Then, he tore off the paper, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it at Wu Chengyue. Wu Chengyue held his daughter with one hand and took the paper ball with the other. When he opened it, there was a sentence written on it. Now your daughter is returned to you in one piece. From the bridge to the bridge, the road to the road. Well water does not interfere with river water. Goodbye. When he looked up again, Lin Xiao was no longer in his original position. Looking left and right, he didn't see any zombies. The little rabbit had also disappeared. Do you think she still has her memories from when she was alive? Mengyu suddenly asked. She walked to Wu Chengyue's side, slightly lowered her eyebrows, and said thoughtfully, Wu Chengyue looked back at her. His eyes flickered when he heard her words. He nodded slightly. Actually, I think so too. Otherwise, how do you explain her human-like behavior? He had already thought about this problem. Compared to those normal zombies that had lost their minds, and the fully transformed high-level zombies. Aside from its appearance, the zombie in front of him behaved exactly like a human. He didn't show any appetite for humans, and he even took care of children. They did not harm or eat humans. This was beyond the scope of zombies. Furthermore, she was tasting the snake's blood. Does this mean that she eats animals? Wu Chengyue recalled the way Lin Xiao put the snake's blood into her mouth. Speculation flashed across his handsome face. Mengyu's eyes also lit up. She looked at him and said, It's very likely. Zombies have an instinctive sense of hunger if they don't eat people. It was understandable that she used animals as a substitute for human flesh to fill her stomach. But we have never heard of zombies eating the flesh of animals, and those mutated animals also don't eat zombies. They all carried the same kind of virus in their bodies, so they probably wouldn't have any taste. But I guess this female zombie doesn't think of herself as a zombie. Wu Chengyue looked at his daughter and checked her body. Otherwise, why wouldn't she eat a living person like Lingling? What I want to know now is, if she really has the memory before she became a zombie, did she recover it later? Or was it when you became a zombie? Mengyu shook her head and said, I'm really not sure about that. If I knew earlier, I would have asked her just now. I don't know if zombies like her have already appeared in the zombie city. If this zombie is hostile to the human base, then she will be able to control other zombies in the future. The base may be in a big crisis. At the end, Mengyu's expression suddenly changed. She said with some regret, We should have kept this zombie and figured out her situation. Letting her go like this is equivalent to letting go of an invisible bomb that can explode at any time. Hearing Mengyu's words, Wu Chengyue also became silent. At this time, listening to their words, maybe feeling their hostility towards Lin Xiao, Wu Yueling suddenly twisted in Wu Chengyue's arms. Then when Wu Chengyue looked at her, she shook her head vigorously. No way. Sister Zombie won't harm people. Looking at his daughter's disapproving eyes, Wu Chengyue suddenly sighed. He said to Mengyu, I don't think the situation you said is the case. At least today this female zombie suppressed her zombie instincts and temporarily didn't have any thoughts of coveting humans. And I think she should be from the south. Seeing her rushing to the south, I don't know if she wants to find her family or go back to her hometown. Mingyu looked at him strangely and said, how can you be sure that she won't covet humans? What if one day her reason is suppressed by her instincts? That is equal to losing her humanity, but still having the intelligence of a human. Her understanding of humans is equal to a sharp sword. Wu Chengyue looked at her, and then looked at his daughter. Seeing Wu Yueling's aggrieved expression that he didn't believe her, he suddenly smiled. But she can even subdue Ling Ling. I don't think she is a bad zombie. Ling Ling is so sensitive and doesn't want to get close to others, but is willing to get close to her. I think I can trust my Ling Ling. Wu Yueling nodded her head vigorously. Mingyu looked at the two of them, sighed and said, well, let's assume that what you said is right. I hope she won't plot against the human base in the future. Otherwise, it will really be a big trouble. Well, let's also go. Ling Ling has also been found. We can finally return to the base. As they spoke, they turned around and walked out of the orchard. Wu Yueling reluctantly looked at the place where Lin Xiao had just disappeared. When the three of them walked out, they saw that one of the two cars on the roadside was missing. When they walked up, Wu Chengyue and Xiao Liqing saw Xiao Liqing looking at the road ahead with a dumbfounded expression. Dumbfounded? He didn't know what he saw. Minor success? What's wrong? Where's that car? Has it left? After Mingyu came up, she looked at the position of Lin Xiao's car and the car marks on the ground strangely and asked. Only then did Xiao Liqing come back to his senses. He looked at the two of them with a strange expression and said, yes, it's gone. However, I didn't see anyone approaching at all. Suddenly, I heard the car door open. I didn't even have the time to check who it was. The car drove away by itself. After saying that, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. Suddenly, he saw Lingling in Wu Qingyue's arms and said in surprise, Little Lingling? You guys found her. Wu Chengyue and Mingyu looked at each other, and the same thought flashed in their minds. The one who drove away without a sound. Could it be the female zombie from before? If it was a normal zombie, of course, it would be impossible, but they had already seen Lin Xiao's strangeness. Therefore, it wasn't strange for a female zombie with memories to drive. Chapter 80. Mengyu's eyes flickered, and she quickly accepted this idea. She said to Xiao Liqing, yes, Lingling was in the orchard just now. We followed Lingling's aura here. What's there to be surprised about? Xiao Liqing smiled and said, oh, I didn't expect it to be so fast. You didn't say that Lingling was nearby. Wu Yueling saw a stranger, so she silently hugged Wu Qingyue's neck and didn't move. She just stared at the direction they had just come out from. No one knew if she was thinking about Lin Xiao. At this time, Lin Xiao had entered the space with her car, and she was not far from Wu Chengyue and the others. After entering the space, Lin Xiao immediately left with the invisibility skill. Then she went to Junjun, who had been hiding for a long time. She had sensed Junjun's arrival long ago, but Junjun was very smart and didn't appear next to her. Maybe he was afraid of getting in her way. So when Lin Xiao left, she conveniently turned to the place where she was hiding. Then she put her into the space. Then Lin Xiao walked out of the orchard and saw another car next to her car. There was a soldier standing next to it. So in order not to alarm the soldier, she had to go invisible and quietly walk to her car. When the soldier wasn't paying attention, she immediately appeared from the space. Then she quickly sat in the driver's seat, started the car, and stepped on the accelerator. Her movements were very smooth and fast, and she drove away very quickly. Seeing Xiao Liqing's confused expression from the rearview mirror, Lin Xiao wanted to laugh. After driving far away, she got out of the car and put the car into the space. Then she went into the space. She didn't go far because she wanted to wait for Wu Chengyue and the others to leave. Then she went back to the farm. At this time, Lin Xiao and Junjun were squatting next to the giant snake's body. Lin Xiao found a big bowl and used her sharp claws to find the position of the giant snake's blood vessel and cut it open. When the blood gushed out, she quickly caught it with the big bowl. Maybe the snake had been dead for a while, so the blood didn't flow fast. So after Lin Xiao caught half of the bowl, the blood stopped flowing. Lin Xiao put the bowl back and sniffed it. It was very fragrant with a faint fishy smell, but she didn't drink it immediately. Instead, She handed the bowl of blood to Junjun. Junjun took the bowl curiously, then put it under her nose and sniffed it, but he didn't smell anything. She looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao sensed her thoughts and knew that Junjun might not be interested in the meat of these mutated animals. However, she did not give up. Instead, she pointed at her mouth. Then he made a gesture of drinking. Junjun frowned. She had always been afraid of snakes. Although the snake was already dead, it was still horrifying to look at. Now that she was asked to drink snake blood, Junjun felt that this was somewhat unacceptable. She hesitantly looked at Lin Xiao and saw Lin Xiao firmly nodding to her. She could not disobey Lin Xiao's instructions, so she could only take a deep breath. Although she couldn't breathe. Resisting the strange feeling of rejection in her heart, Junjun put the bowl to her mouth and reluctantly took a sip. Then there was no feeling. When he drank it, he felt a rich flavor. It was neither fishy, salty, nor sweet. There was no smell at all. It didn't seem to be as bad as he had imagined. She smacked her lips, looked at the blood in the bowl, and then at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao could sense her thoughts, so although she rejected it, he did not feel disgusted. He let her continue to drink. So Junjun could only frown and drink it all in one breath. Lin Xiao didn't know if the snake blood could suppress her hunger, but she drank a little more. There shouldn't be any harm in it. Anyway, it wouldn't hurt her stomach. Seeing that she finished a bowl, Lin Xiao took the bowl back. Then she made another cut on another part of the snake's body and continued to collect the snake blood. After that, Lin Xiao picked up the bowl and drank it herself. Lin Xiao couldn't feel the cold temperature of the snake blood, but she could feel a sweet and salty taste spreading in her mouth. Like drinking water, she gulped down the blood in no time. Then she took another bowl and handed it to Junjun. However, Junjun stood up, shook her head at her, and stepped back. Lin Xiao didn't force her to drink anymore. Seeing that she didn't drink anymore, she continued to drink. When she wanted to take the fourth bowl, it was already too late. So Lin Xiao gave the bowl to Junjun to wash and began to peel the snake skin. While peeling the skin, she tore off pieces of snake meat and put them in her mouth to chew. She wanted to ask Junjun to eat it too, but seeing Junjun's reluctant expression, she gave up. After Junjun finished washing the bowl, she turned around and saw Lin Xiao digging the snake meat and eating it with relish. But she was not interested at all, so she went back to the small space to look at the little boy. The little boy was sitting on the bed, holding a strawberry in his hand. He had already bitten half of it. When Lin Xiao looked at the snake, she thought that she couldn't finish it. She thought that she didn't know how long the snake could stay. The space she was in was not a vacuum, and time was not still. So the snake's body would definitely go bad if it was left here for a long time. She simply sat there and thought as she ate. She wondered if she could finish the snake in one go. But her stomach, thinking of her stomach, Lin Xiao subconsciously looked at her abdomen. Well, she only saw her clothes. She wanted to touch it with her hands, but found that her hands were covered with the snake's mucus. She thought about it and gave up. Then she continued to eat, observing the outside world while eating. Until she saw Wu Chengyue's car drive away, Lin Xiao breathed a sigh of relief. They finally left. She still had to go back to pick vegetables. Yes, that's right. The reason why Lin Xiao didn't leave was that she still had to go back to pick vegetables. Not only to pick vegetables, but also to dig up all the edible vegetables and plant them in the space. Lin Xiao immediately stood up. Only then did she realize that she had already eaten half of the snake. She looked at the snake's skeleton, which was mostly bald and had no meat, and the other half was still intact. Damn! How did she eat so much? Lin Xiao was a little confused. The snake was thicker than her thigh, about 11 or 12 meters long. It weighed at least 500 kilograms. So, she ate half of the snake meat in one go. Without the weight of the skeleton and blood, okay, then she had eaten quite a lot. But the problem was, where did she eat the meat? More importantly, she was not full yet. She looked at the remaining snake meat in a daze. It happened to be the upper body. She had eaten the lower body just now, but not the upper body. She hadn't dug out the internal organs like the snake gall. So she thought about it and dug out the snake gall. She decided to eat the snake gall first before going out to dig for vegetables. Chapter 81. Looking at the green and black snake gallbladder that was about the size of a lemon, Lin Xiao opened her mouth wide and was about to swallow it. Without any hesitation, the snake gallbladder was scratched by her canines when she put it in her mouth. Puffed! The broken bile exploded in her mouth. Then, Lin Xiao was dumbfounded. What the fuck? What the fuck? Awoo! She let out a strange cry and covered her mouth abruptly. Her whole face was twisted into a ball. Then, she suddenly jumped up and flew toward the lake. Shocked by her scream, Junjun hurriedly ran out of the small space to take a look and saw that Lin Xiao was already lying by the lake. Her whole head and face were immersed in the water. She didn't know what had happened. Lin Xiao bitterly soaked her face in the water and drank a few mouthfuls of water. Then, she raised her head with a mouthful of water and got up with a painful expression. She squatted there and washed her hands. The snake's bile had made her miserable. Lin Xiao could only feel the bitter taste in her mouth and tongue. It was very, very bitter. Even the yellow lotus she ate before was not so bitter. Turning her head and swallowing the water in her mouth on the ground beside her, Lin Xiao washed her hands and drank another mouthful of water. Only then did she feel a little better, but only a little, because the bitter taste in her mouth had not disappeared. She frowned and looked at the lake with a bitter face. Suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. The lake water had a strange effect. Did she put the snake meat in it? Would it have the effect of keeping them fresh? Thinking of this, she immediately turned around and ran in front of the snake. Then, he slashed his claw at the bare snake bone behind him. Crack! The snake bone and the upper body were broken. Lin Xiao spread out the snake skin that she had peeled off earlier and then cut the snake meat section by section. Without the protection of the snake skin, Lin Xiao's claws were very useful. She easily cut the snake meat and the snake bone. Then, she cut all the meat into pieces and piled them up on the snakeskin that had been laid out. Fortunately, she had picked up a lot of water buckets from outside to water the strawberries. Now, he could use these buckets to store the snake meat, and then soak the snake meat in the buckets with the lake water. In this way, they could know if the lake water had the effect of keeping the snake fresh, and they didn't need to soak the whole snake in the lake. Otherwise, if it rotted in the lake, wouldn't it stink the entire lake? After she finished the cut with a bitter face, Lin Xiao went to wash her hands. She did not go for the pail. After washing his hands, he took out a notebook and wrote on a piece of paper. Then, he walked over to Junjun, who had been watching the show from afar, and stuffed the paper into her hands. Then, he disappeared with the snake bone and the snake head. Help me put the snake meat into a bucket and soak it in the lake water. After coming out, Lin Xiao threw the snake bones and the snake head into the haystack beside him. She touched her stomach. It was still a big hole. He reckoned that half of his stomach was missing, but she had just eaten so much snake meat. Where did it all go? This was illogical. But when Lin Xiao thought about it again, it was already illogical for her to turn into a zombie. What could be more unscientific than this? She felt that it was better to get used to it. Sigh. But the problem was, she had eaten so much snake meat. She was still not full. She suddenly felt that she was actually a starving ghost. She couldn't be a zombie, right? Lin Xiao was speechless as she thought about her own situation. She entered the mutated farm from another position. She felt that the inside of the farm was not like what other people saw, where everything was mutated by the virus and couldn't be eaten. If she planted it in her own space, she could use the lake water to water it every day. Maybe she could slowly eliminate the virus. Because there were no more viruses in the strawberry strain in her space. They were growing well, and the pungent stench had also disappeared. Actually, Lin Xiao stopped here to get these edible vegetables. She didn't just consider the little boy in her space or tiny tot from before. She also thought that if the apocalypse was like this everywhere, then her hometown in the south should also be like this. So maybe her family would also need this food to survive. Lin Xiao thought that if she could find some in this mutated farm, the mutation wouldn't be so serious. If she took some of the seeds, maybe she could plant them in her space. If she dug up the roots of the vegetables and planted them in her space, She didn't know if they would survive. Although it was a bit troublesome, Lin Xiao's actions were fast. The seeds of the various melons and beans were easy to take. So Lin Xiao dug the vegetables in the farm's vegetable field. She directly dug up the vegetables along with the soil and threw them into the space. Although she didn't know if they could survive, but since the strawberries could be planted like that, maybe these vegetables could as well. Actually, Lin Xiao didn't know anything about planting. She was currently treating a dead horse as a living horse as a last resort. Moreover, she dug up a lot of potatoes. Although the mutated potato sprouts looked a bit strange, Lin Xiao discovered that the degree of mutation of the potatoes buried in the ground was very light. Next, Lin Xiao discovered a common problem. After the apocalypse, the bigger the changes to the appearance of the mutated plants, the lower the virus content. It was just that the appearance made people know that it was a mutation with a virus. But in reality, these plants could still be eaten. She felt that this might be a change of the plant's own protective consciousness. Although Lin Xiao was in a hurry to go back home, she could only temporarily stop here to do this. It was also to help her family in the future. Of course, the premise was that they still had to be alive. Finally, considering the problem of time, Lin Xiao walked around the farm for a long time. Turning the door, she picked some vegetables that were lightly infected, and there were even a few that were not infected. Then she picked a lot of pumpkins that were as big and thick as car wheels and dug up a pile of potatoes. She picked a pile of very old green beans and lentils that were about to dry up and prepared to use them as seeds. Then, she entered the space again and began to dig a hole in the grass. Without tools like a hoe, Lin Xiao could only dig with her own claws. Junjun, who was beside her, put her son on the grass, the bed that Tiny Tot used to sleep on. She also went to help Lin Xiao. After Lin Xiao dug the hole, Junjun planted the vegetables in the soil and then buried them. After planting, she went to fetch water to water them. The two of them were busy for a while until the little boy sat on the bed and called for his mother. Then they stopped working. "Mom, I'm hungry." The little boy stared with a pair of bright black eyes. He looked at Junjun, who was washing her hands and walking towards him. The little boy now had strawberries to eat, so his eyes were not as lifeless as before. But his complexion was still not good, and he looked waxy yellow. Although Junjun was very worried about her son's condition, it was already much better than before she met Lin Xiao. She had not eaten or drunk for the past few days, and she was really anxious. Chapter 82. Lin Xiao looked at the little boy's face, and then she left the space again. She picked up a lot of dry firewood from the nearby forest. After thinking about it, she picked up a few stones and made a small stove in the open space by the lake in the space. Anyway, she didn't have many things in the space now, but she still had everything she wanted to use. For example, a pot and so on. Although one had been burned by Xiedong before, but there were still others. Fortunately, she had also collected a lot of things in the house where she found the little boy and the convenience store not far below. Lin Xiao looked at the various melons she had piled up on the other side and wrote on the paper, "I'll make snake soup for him." Junjun was stunned for a moment and looked at Lin Xiao hesitantly. Lin Xiao understood her mind and knew what she was thinking. She was thinking that the snake was mutated and its body was full of viruses. Could it really be given to a child to eat? What if it was infected? Lin Xiao took out the paper and wrote, "I said that the water of this lake can eliminate the virus. Soak the snake meat for a while and then boil it with boiling water. Then boil it with high heat. The virus would probably be completely gone." So she started a fire on the stone stove. It was not difficult for her to start a fire in the wild. After all, she often trained in the wild in the past, and sometimes she cooked on the spot outside. The main thing was that she had found a usable lighter in the convenience store. But she didn't have salt here, so it might not taste so good. But it was better than nothing. After the fire was lit, she added water to the pot and put it on to boil. Then she began to fish out a piece of snake meat from the bucket and took a soup plate to put it. But she couldn't cut the snake meat and the bones into small pieces because she didn't have a knife. She used a dagger, which was too small. It was okay to cut the snake meat, but not the bones. So she had to use the dagger to cut off the part she had cut with her claws. While stuffing it into her mouth, she cut off the snake meat in the middle. She didn't throw the bones aside until all the flesh on the snake was gone. Then she washed the snake meat with the lake water and waited for the water on the stove to boil. Junjun stood by the side and watched her, even though she wanted to help. But when she saw Lin Xiao's neat appearance, she felt that she had nothing to do. The firewood that Lin Xiao picked was very dry and burned very quickly. Moreover, she didn't put much water in the pot. Soon, steam rose up. After the water boiled, Lin Xiao poured the boiling water into the bowl of snake meat. After boiling the snake meat, he poured away the boiling water. Only then did he add cold water and put the snake meat into the pot to cook. She broke a great deal of wood, put it in, and made a great fire. In Lin Xiao and Junjun's eyes, they could not see the color of the fire. To them, it was transparent. They could not feel the temperature of the fire, but they could feel a scorching energy filling the transparent fire. After cooking the snake meat again, Lin Xiao added water again and cooked it on low heat. After cooking for a long time, Lin Xiao even scraped a potato and threw it in. When he felt that it was almost ready, he also picked 2 vegetable leaves without the virus, washed them, and put them in. Lin Xiao was no longer interested in the smell of the snake soup. She was only interested in raw meat. But she could smell if there were any toxins in the smell, and if humans could eat it. In the end, the snake soup almost became snake stew. Because the potatoes were all mushy, when Lin Xiao extinguished the fire, she scooped the snake soup into a bowl. Then, she took a small spoon and brought it to the little boy. Wow! So, with her ugly face, she scared the little boy again. Looking at the back of the little boy's head, Lin Xiao was speechless. Damn it! Her good intentions were not rewarded. Junjun laughed awkwardly and quickly took the bowl of soup from Lin Xiao's hands. Lin Xiao watched expressionlessly as she took the bowl away and walked into the small space. Then, she came out of the space and took a look at the farm. He let go of the car and continued to drive towards the south. Not long after, she got on the highway and went all the way south. Soon, she left the city of Shanghai and entered the Zhe province. She did not encounter anything along the way. There was no longer the pursuit of the level 5 ice-type zombie. Little Tot was also sent away, leaving only her and Junjun, 2 female zombies and a human child, a strange combination. Along the way, Lin Xiao would make 2 bowls of snake soup for the little boy to drink. Lin Xiao would also take some time to observe the vegetables that she was good at planting. It seemed that all the energy in her space was in the lake. After watering the vegetables with the lake water, all of them were alive. At first, Lin Xiao thought it was a problem with the soil, so she left a few plants unwatered. But they died soon after, and the snake meat that was soaked in the bucket was unexpectedly discovered by her. The lake water could really keep fresh. The snake meat that was soaked in the bucket showed no signs of spoilage. In order to get to the south as soon as possible, Lin Xiao drove day and night. Only when she cooked for the little boy for the first few days did she stop. Later on, Junjun learned how to do it by her side. So after that, it was Junjun who took care of her son's food. And Junjun also realized that when she was very hungry, when she smelled the little boy's scent and wanted to pounce on him, she would run to the lake and drink as much water as she could. Slowly, she realized that the lake water could suppress her appetite for living human flesh. After discovering this, Junjun was very happy. At least this way, she wouldn't lose her mind and hurt the little boy. So soon, they passed through Zhe province. They entered the Min province. And at this time, the person they were looking for. They also entered the Min province. But they came in the opposite direction of Lin Xiao. Lin Feng took his few but very loyal subordinates, protected his family all the way, and escaped from the pursuing troops. In the Lianqing district of Longyan City in Min province, on the top floor of a 4-story shopping mall in the city. In the place that was originally used as a KTV entertainment club, a group of people stayed here, quietly hiding. The door of the KTV club was closed tightly. Behind the door were 2 soldiers in camouflage uniforms. A young man was sitting on the billiard table next to them. He sat there cross-legged with a gloomy face, holding a wooden stick as thick as a thumb in his hand. The other hand held a sharp dagger, and he was whittling the small wooden stick in his hand. The tip of the small wooden stick was sharpened to a point. A group of people stayed in a private room inside the club. Some were sitting, some were standing. It was a man in his 30s. He looked resolute and had a very serious aura. His eyes were sharp, and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. It made people subconsciously not dare to approach him. Of course, this was if you ignored the clever little girl sitting on his lap. The little girl didn't look tall, but she was very delicate and cute. She was clean, and her big eyes were shining with a sly light. Chapter 83. Next to the man sat an older woman. The quality of the clothes she wore was not considered good, but it was very tidy, not messy or dirty. Her long hair was neatly tied into a low ponytail, and her whole body exuded a kind of sad aura. The middle-aged woman's eyebrows drooped, and her expression still carried a sense of grief. In addition to these three people, there were two other women sitting on the old sofa. They were all around 30 years old, very beautiful, and had outstanding temperament. Their eyes carried a strong, imposing manner. After the end of the world, women were already rare, but here suddenly appeared four. There were two men standing inside and outside the private room, and both of them were quite young, around 20 years old. I didn't expect that Yang Jianhua, this bastard, to not only kill Ah Qiao, but also want to kill us. Too hateful. I didn't expect this man to be so cruel. I shouldn't have let Ah Qiao keep him, the middle-aged woman said while gnashing her teeth. The resentment and anger in her eyes quickly drowned out the pain from before. He even thought of the idea to hit me and sister-in-law. With his lecherous character, not only has he coveted Big Sister for a long time. To me and sister-in-law, he never concealed the desire in his eyes. If not for Big Sister, I'm afraid he would have already made a move. It's just that Sister Lin only believes in him, not me. Two younger women, one of them with long hair straight to the waist, a delicate and beautiful woman said. Her words were filled with extreme disgust and hatred for Yang Jianhua. The other woman next to her had a very pretty baby face. Her expression at this time was also the same as the other woman, but she was much more violent. Thinking that the man secretly stared at her with that kind of perverted and disgusting eyes, she turned around and kicked the small chair beside her. She didn't want to say a word more. The main thing he wants to kill us is that he is afraid of letting the tiger return to the mountain. In the future, we will find a chance to take revenge on him, so he took advantage of this time to chase us. I'm afraid that if he doesn't kill us personally, he won't be able to sleep when he goes back. The man holding the little girl said calmly. At this time, the little girl on his leg pouted and said, Big Aunt is so powerful. She won't die. The man turned to look at her, his sharp eyes slightly softened. Stroking her head, he sighed and said, Maybe. We can only wait for little A to come back to confirm the news. Feng, it's not safe for us to hide here. We should leave sooner or later. We can only meet up with Li Zheng and the others first before we can plan our next step. The middle-aged woman forced herself to calm down and said to her son. Lin Feng looked at his mother and nodded. He replied, It really isn't safe. Now that he had rested well, he had adjusted himself. Let's go. As he spoke, he picked up his daughter from his lap, stood up, and walked out. The others immediately stood up and followed him out of the private room. When they arrived at the hall, the young man who had been patiently sharpening the wooden stick saw them come out. He immediately jumped down from the billiard table. Are we finally leaving? He asked the crowd. Lin Feng looked at him and asked, What's the situation outside? Do you feel anything? Lin Hao shook his head and said, There are too few plants in this city. The range of the sensing is not large. However, I don't sense any danger around this building for now. Lin Feng nodded and said, Then let's go. Thus, everyone took a few steps back. The two soldiers guarding the door immediately opened the door. The zombies who were originally lying on the door wanting to come in were immediately opened by them. They immediately fell to the ground. Bang, 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 bang. After a series of gunshots, these zombies just entered the door. They were killed by the soldiers in camouflage uniforms in the room with one shot. One of the zombies had a wooden stick stuck in its head. It was the one that Lin Hao had just sharpened. As for the others, they didn't even make a move. The group of people quickly left the hall. Just a few kilometers below this shopping mall, a group of people was staying in a room on the second floor. They seemed to have sensed something and looked in the direction of the shopping mall. Was there a gunshot just now? A man stood up and looked around in the distance, puzzled. I didn't hear it. Did you hear it wrong? It's gone now. Maybe. Which direction? Whether I heard it wrong or not, let's go and take a look first. Maybe it's them. Don't miss the opportunity. Yes, it seems to be coming from there. Form up, let's go. Yes. Get ready to go. Of course, when they found the exact location of the shopping mall, except for the dead zombies and the marks left by the car, they saw nothing, because Lin Xiao and the others only shot the zombies upstairs. After going downstairs, they all tried not to make a move, but quickly returned to the car. Then they drove away. Their car went in that direction. Keep chasing. On the other side, Lin Xiao was passing through Ningda City. She continued to drive, and Jun was sitting in the driver's seat. Out of City B, they went to Zhe Province and Min Province. These days, they didn't meet any humans, but they met a few waves of high-level zombies. But they were all level 3 or 4, and Lin Xiao easily killed them. She could deal with level 3 easily, but it was a little more troublesome to deal with level 4. But no matter what, it was much easier to deal with level 5. After killing them, there were still zombie cores to absorb. It was a very comfortable thing. Lin Xiao didn't expect to pass through the whole of Zhe Province so easily. But after entering Ningda City, she had a strange feeling. She couldn't tell what it was, but it felt weird. She couldn't tell whether it was good or bad. The closer they were to the city, the more zombies there were. This was what Lin Xiao found along the way. And she also found that those high-level zombies, after gaining intelligence, were very good at hiding. So Lin Xiao had to bypass the densely populated areas because there were too many zombies. And many ordinary zombies like to wander on the streets and roads. As soon as Lin Xiao's car passed, they would feel her breath and avoid. But the movement, the footsteps, the speed of walking. So, Lin Xiao, who was blocked by zombies several times, decided to go to a place with fewer people. After entering Ningda City, Lin Xiao had this strange feeling more and more frequently. Although it wasn't strong, it was faint. But Lin Xiao had to pay attention to it. She wanted to know why she had this feeling. After driving for a few hours, they passed through the whole of Ningda City. Still, nothing happened, or nothing was discovered. Chapter 84. Lin Xiao didn't know that she was not far from the person she was looking for, just 2 city blocks away. But she and the other party missed each other. So when Lin Xiao entered Fuzhou City, Lin Feng and the others had already entered Saming City. Moreover, Lin Feng's group was heading towards Nanping City, while Lin Xiao's group was heading towards Putian and Xuanzhou. So they missed each other. Lin Xiao didn't meet Lin Feng and the others who were being chased. She took Jun into Fuzhou City. When they passed through Min County, they were blocked again. They were still blocked by densely packed zombies, but this time it was different from the previous times. She hadn't even entered the center of the county when she was blocked by a group of zombies standing still. Lin Xiao stopped the car and leaned on the steering wheel, looking strangely at the group of zombies standing still 200 or 300 meters in front of them. After Doomsday, zombies were very free and undisciplined. They all acted on their own. Even if they were densely packed together, they would still wander around randomly. Suddenly, the group of 200 or 300 ordinary zombies in front of her was just standing there quietly, looking at her with a blank expression. It was a little scary. It seemed like all the ordinary zombies in the surrounding area had gathered here, except for the group of zombies blocking the road. There were no zombies in the other places. Just as Lin Xiao was carefully observing the surrounding situation and the strange group of zombies in front of her, Jun suddenly let out a painful growl from the back seat. Hisawa, Lin Xiao immediately turned around and saw Jun covering her head with her hands. His face, with serious dark circles under his eyes, was now twisted into a ball of wrinkles. Her eyes were closed tightly, and her mouth was open as if she was in great pain. She seemed to be enduring something, but also seemed to be suppressing something. Oh, woo. What's wrong? Lin Xiao didn't have time to write, so she could only growl at Jun. Junjun forced her eyes open and roared at Lin Xiao. "Oh, whoa." Lin Xiao confirmed something from her voice and thoughts. It was as if there was a strong will that wanted to control her consciousness, to make her surrender and obey. However, when she sensed this intent, she felt an immense pain in her mind. It was as if her mind was going to explode. Will? Control? Obey? Lin Xiao's expression was calm as some thoughts flashed through her mind. She reached out and grabbed Junjun's hand. Then the two zombies disappeared from the car. After entering the space, Lin Xiao immediately stared at Junjun's reaction. Sure enough, it was just as she had expected. His expression became much more relaxed. Seeing that Junjun was slowly recovering, Lin Xiao raised his hand and pointed at his head. He didn't make a sound, but his eyes were filled with questions. Junjun understood what she meant. Taking a deep breath, she looked at her and nodded. He meant to tell her that after she came in, she didn't receive that strong thought and her head didn't hurt anymore. Therefore, she told Lin Xiao that this space could isolate her from the pain that made her mind feel like it was about to explode. It seemed that her space could isolate everything from the outside world, which made things much easier. But why didn't she feel anything at all? Only Junjun could feel it? At this time, Junjun, who had completely recovered, also thought of this question. She looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao took a piece of paper and wrote, "I don't feel anything." Then Junjun was even more confused and looked at her in confusion. Both of them were zombies. Why could she feel the feeling of danger and pain, but Lin Xiao didn't feel anything? Lin Xiao closed her eyes to observe the situation outside. She found that the group of zombies didn't change. She decided to go out and find out what was going on. She wrote on the paper, "You stay here, I'll go out and have a look." Junjun nodded. That was the only thing she could do. Then Lin Xiao put her in the space and turned around to go out. After coming out, Lin Xiao was still sitting in the driver's seat. She looked at the motionless zombie wall in front of her, thinking about what was going on. But her current position was a little far away. It was better to drive the car closer to see if she could sense anything. She was very curious why Junjun had such a big reaction when she arrived here, but she didn't feel anything. This made it difficult for her to make a judgment. If she could sense something, she should be able to know something. Lin Xiao slowly drove the car to the zombie crowd. In the past, when those low-level zombies encountered her, they would slowly retreat. Lin Xiao wanted to see if these motionless zombies would avoid her. The car slowly moved forward, and the distance between her and the group of zombies shortened little by little. 200 meters, 150 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters. As Lin Xiao's car got closer and closer, the group of standing zombies still didn't move. He just stood there quietly with a blank expression on his face, not moving at all. And the strange thing was, the closer they got, Lin Xiao still couldn't sense anything. There were no messages, no messy thoughts, no emotions that only knew how to cry out for hunger. There was nothing. What was going on? Her ability to sense the zombies had completely disappeared here. She was used to sensing the simple thoughts of those ordinary zombies that only knew to want to eat. Now that she saw so many scary zombies, she suddenly couldn't hear anything. She always felt that something was missing. The car slowly drove to a position 7 or 8 meters away from the zombie crowd, and Lin Xiao stepped on the brake. Because at this time, she felt an oppressive sense of crisis. Just after she stopped the car, at this time, the zombie wall in front of her that had been motionless. Suddenly, it moved silently. They slowly separated from the middle to make an empty path that could only allow one person to pass through. Then Lin Xiao saw a figure slowly walking out from the back of the zombie crowd along the path that the zombies had separated. Once Lin Xiao saw her, she understood everything. So it was like this. There was a very high-level zombie here that controlled these zombies. But to be able to control these hundreds of zombies and make them stand there quietly without making a sound, this required a lot of spiritual power. So, this high-level zombie that slowly walked out, its spiritual power was very strong. It was even stronger than the level 5 zombie that Lin Xiao had met before. And when Lin Xiao looked at this zombie, she was a little surprised. She saw that this zombie that walked out, except for the 2 black eye circles that were similar to Junjun's, her appearance was well maintained. A pair of blood-red eyes filled the entire eye sockets, but there was a black pupil in the middle. A cute little mouth, but it was dark purple. Matched with a pale face, it wasn't ugly. Moreover, this zombie looked very young. It was a young girl. She was about 1.5 meters tall, with a slender body and long limbs. Her long hair was actually tied into 2 high ponytails. She looked very cute, because she originally had a baby face. She wore a little white princess dress, clean and spotless. On her feet was a pair of red shoes, also very cute. But it was this very beautiful girl zombie that gave Lin Xiao a very oppressive and dangerous feeling. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.